Our story begins with a die being rolled and landing on the number 6. A narrator shouts in excitement as the man gets a good number and asks everyone to applaud. Seeing a line of people clapping, the confused person wonders where they are. The man in front of him explains that he is dead and that the die will determine his rebirth. The challenger was lucky to roll a 6, meaning he will be an idol in his next life. Someone hands a die to the confused person who realizes their life will be determined by this roll. They throw the die with all their will, and unfortunately, they get the worst result possible. The narrator shouts that it landed on 1 and everyone comments on their tremendous bad luck. With statistics appearing, the narrator announces that they will be a bread delivery worker. As the figure despairs, the narrator explains that their life will be harsh based on the number they rolled. As they fall, the figure begs to be reborn again. We cut to a school building and someone calls for Dante, our protagonist. Suddenly, the motherless one at home slaps Dante while he thinks about how much he hates his own name, and soon after, he starts getting kicked. The motherless one complains about not receiving the drink he wanted. Our protagonist apologizes while being stomped on. He opens the milk carton, saying someone has to drink it. And Dante has the drink poured all over him as they laugh. Lying on the ground, he feels utterly defeated and reflects on how his life was doomed from the start, doubting he could ever change it. He slowly walks away, burdened by his failure, but suddenly sees a light. And of course it had to be a beautiful woman. Watching her pass by, he wonders how he could ever exist in the same world as a girl like her. They make eye contact and our useless protagonist hides in embarrassment. Dante explains that Yeonju is the most beautiful girl in the school. She rejects everyone, which makes him happy because if he can't have her, then no one else should. When he imagines someone winning her over one day, he nearly has a heart attack from jealousy. He thinks that to have happiness like that, one would have to have saved the country in their past life. In the hallway, someone walks by, rumored to be the one who started it all. The motherless one orders our protagonist to go fetch food for him. And our protagonist mutters to himself about how the motherless one always forgets to have breakfast. Yeonju stops him and asks where he's going since the teacher is coming. Our protagonist is at a loss for words. Dante turns red and then lies, making it seem like the food is for himself. Our useless protagonist gets nervous, unsure of what to say, when she casually mentions that the school bread is great. With his defeated soul, the protagonist asks if she wants him to buy some for her. Dante walks down the stairs, embarrassed by the dumb thing he just said. But even so, he remembers Yeonju saying his name, which makes him happy. When he returns, the classroom is buzzing with talk about the beauty of the new student. He introduces himself as Taebin. The girls say they've seen him on TV and ask him to sing. Meanwhile, our protagonist gets scolded by the motherless one because the teacher has already arrived. Seeing Yeonju happy about the new student's arrival, Dante just looks sad and gets even more uncomfortable when Taebin sits next to him. Burning with envy, the protagonist wonders if Taebin is trying to annoy him. He starts noticing how different Taebin is from him, handsome with perfect skin. The only thing they share is a name. He wonders if the handsome guy must have saved the country in his past life to be born like that. But his attention is soon called by the motherless group. They scold him for being late with their food. Taebin watches the situation our protagonist is in. Meanwhile, everyone gathers around Taebin, showering him with praise. Dante watches as the handsome guy excels at everything, from sports to academics. He wonders how someone can be good at everything. Things that seem impossibly out of reach for our protagonist are just another ordinary part of Taebin's life. Yeonju talks to the handsome guy about the teacher wanting to speak with him. Watching the two get along so well, Dante feels like he doesn't belong in that reality. He remembers thinking he'd be happy just watching from afar. And suddenly, he runs away with his eyes closed. But he soon trips and drops all the food. People see him but simply walk past without helping. Dante just remains silent, overwhelmed by emotions. The motherless one, already irritated by the new student, gets even more frustrated with the spill of food. And he starts kicking Dante, ordering him to go buy the food again. Soon he starts getting beaten up by the motherless ones. As he walks with all his wounds, he enters the room. And there is Taebin, using his phone. Dante sees him playing and comments on how nice it must be for him. Taebin gets worried about his injuries, but the useless one pushes him away and says it's none of his business. He quickly apologizes for being rude. While crying, he thinks about how great it would be to be Taebin and how lucky he is, saying that things would be different if he had been born like him. Taebin asks what he would change if he could change anything. Our protagonist asks him to stop saying such things since nothing will change. Taebin looks at him seriously and says he can change him as much as he wants. Our protagonist looks at him as if he had seen a single ray of hope in his life, and the handsome guy asks if Dante wants to play a game. Soon, we see the thoughts of our loser, who sees himself as a character with the worst stats. Maybe it's fate, but he was born to lose, and he watches the winners take everything he wants. Soon, our protagonist asks about the game while wiping his tears. Taebin coldly looks outside. He starts talking about it being an old school with small classrooms. Dante feels uneasy watching him speak. The handsome guy comments that just because they seem better, they pretend to be kind and rush to help. And if you're worse, they ignore or use you. Looking at Dante, he asks if that's fair. Our protagonist gets scared and asks why he's saying that. Taebin says that he thinks the same way. Worried, Dante thinks about how completely different he seems. The handsome guy asks if he would despise people if he were good-looking and tall. And if he became famous, it would be like living another life. Then he comments that it could be as easy as a video game. Dante looks at him in disbelief, then clenches his fists and asks if all that is possible. Taebin asks if he would believe it. Our protagonist simply questions how he could do it. Suddenly, Yeonju enters, saying her practical class took too long, and she sees the two of them standing there staring at each other. She's surprised to see Dante there, and asks about his bruised face. Soon, our unfortunate protagonist realizes that they were bound to meet all the time. Sensing the strange atmosphere, she asks if they were fighting. Tabin forces a fake smile, saying they were just talking. Our protagonist gets irritated by the situation and grabs his backpack, running out of the place, shocking the handsome guy who calls for him to wait. Anju asks if she came at bad time, but he quickly says everything was fine and that it was nothing. His phone starts vibrating with some messages, and he sees that the mission failed because the bread distributor ran away out of envy. The next message asks if he wants to give up on his mission. Anju comments on the text on his phone. He replies that everyone plays something these days. Then we see more about the mission, which was to turn a loser into an ally. Below, there's an option to switch the mission to making the most popular girl in school his girlfriend, and he asks Anju if she would like to go eat. Our protagonist runs while we are shown that everything will begin from now on. Already at home, Dongtae tries to study, but throws his book away, saying he doesn't care anymore. Amid the mess, he thinks he's an idiot. Soon, he finds himself wondering if they are in a relationship since they always leave together. Our protagonist imagines various possibilities for this, but there is nothing to suggest they went home together. Suddenly, the rain starts falling and our protagonist runs to take the clothes off the clothes line. When he steps outside to get the clothes, he immediately feels restless about what happened. In the shower, Dongtae seems uneasy as he recalls those words, and wonders if he could really change. Looking at himself in the mirror, he sees an ugly person with a bad personality, then quickly concludes that it's impossible for someone like him to change. While commenting that listening to that was a waste of time, his doorbell starts ringing. He walks to the door and someone asks him to open it quickly because it was raining. It was his mother, collapsed on the ground, completely drunk. She says she didn't drink, that she just went out because she was sad. Dongtae seems to already know how to handle the situation and simply helps her up. When night falls, the emptiness seems to swallow his life and our protagonist thinks that nothing can change. At school, the motherless ones ordered Dongtae to fetch gym clothes. As he goes down the stairs, he comes across Yeonju. Embarrassed by what happened yesterday, he just greets her. But Yeonju asks him to wait. And she asked about yesterday because she was really worried, while our useless protagonist hides in the corner, dying of embarrassment. She questions him about his injuries, wondering if he fought with Tabin, and she worries that she might have caused it. Our useless protagonist says it's no one's fault, and as for the injuries, he simply tripped. He just thanks her for worrying about him. Dongtae looks at his future motivation for going to the gym as if she were a light in the middle of his sad life. At the same time, he feels out of place because he can now talk to the girl of his dreams. He looks down, too nervous. Our protagonist even tries to say something, but the words don't come out right, and just as he is about to ask if she was going somewhere, someone suddenly shouts that a fight is happening, and some students comment that the motherless group is going to beat up Tabin. They quickly get confused by the sudden news, but Yeonju immediately runs off to help him. When the protagonist tries to run after her, he slips and falls to the ground like a sack of potatoes. But he gets up, nearly in tears, worried about what might be happening. The news of the fight starts spreading through the school and everyone is talking about it. We see a large crowd of students moving toward the rooftop where the fight is happening and some comment that it's going to be a total beatdown. Dongtae hears some students say that the loser will have to change classes, and he wonders if Tabin is crazy, but he also thinks about how Yeonju ran off without even looking back. When he reaches the top floor, he has to push through a crowd of people. He soon finds Yeonju, who apologizes for running off suddenly, but he says it's fine, and he asks her why no one is on the rooftop. Then we see a student blocking the way, saying that the motherless group won't let anyone go up to the rooftop. With a sad expression, he explains that if anyone calls the teachers or tries to go up, they will kill Tabin. And up there, we start hearing the sounds of punches and kicks. Anju says they won't let that happen. But when she looks around, everyone seems unwilling to help. So she says she'll go herself and starts heading up. That's where the nerd shouts for her to stop. Trembling, our protagonist steps in her way and says he will go instead. He explains that they already told him to bring the gym uniforms and getting slapped around is nothing new to him. Everyone falls completely silent as they watch him climb the stairs. Anju seems to be the only one truly worried about him. Dongtae feels like he's just going to another ordinary place, considering how many times the motherless group has beaten him. As he opens the door, he sees a flash of light, and we see all the motherless guys on the ground, along with a cube in Tabin's hands. Our protagonist sees his hands stained with ketchup. Then in silence, he wonders how Tabin could have done all that, and he ends up asking him if he really did it himself. The motherless leader drags himself up after waking from his little nap and asks what kind of weird trick Tabin pulled, right as his hand gets crushed. Tabin tells him he shouldn't be complaining. He kicks him again and tells him to stay down. Dongtae says that's enough because they're already hurt. Tabin asks if our protagonist doesn't find this exciting. As he kicks the motherless guy again, he says that just because someone leads a group, they think they can beat up others. The useless one calls him strange, both for what he said yesterday and for what he's doing now. But Tabin just replies that this is nothing more than a game. Our protagonist says that life isn't a game. Tabin laughs and agrees because it really isn't. But it would be a lot more interesting if it were. Then we see a mission on his phone instructing him to defeat the school trash, and he walks away. Dongtae runs after him, asking him to wait because something about this is really weird. And he finds himself surrounded by people praising Tabin for putting the motherless group in their place. Dongtae just stands there, watching the girl he likes worry about another guy. Seeing everyone crowd around him, concerned. No one remembers that he was the one who went up to the rooftop, leaving him with nothing but the purest envy. Lowering his head, he sadly realizes he will never be like him. He can only remember Tabin saying that it was unfair, that just by looking better or worse, people will treat you differently. And that was being proven true right in front of his eyes. Dongtae starts thinking about the possibility that the game might be real, but he tells himself not to be fooled. If life were a game, he would just be a low-level mob. There's no way to adjust his stats or change his character. What a terrible game that would be. Only people born with everything can go around saying that life is just a game. He looks at Yeonju and questions how she doesn't understand that the person with her is neither kind nor gentle. Someone quickly asks if they are dating. They respond that they're not, despite holding hands. Dongtae promises to expose Taebin's true nature to protect her. Later, at the end of the day, everyone is already saying their goodbyes. And as expected, the two of them are leaving together. But our useless protagonist is right behind them, following. A truck passes and Taebin protects Eunju from it, bringing them very close together. Dongtae bites his lip in jealousy at the sight. She thanks him and he just stands there, holding her in silence. Our useless protagonist nearly faints thinking he was about to kiss her. But his phone starts vibrating, and they step apart. When Taebin looks at the message, he seems a bit uneasy. He says his brother doesn't have his house key and needs him to go open the door, so unfortunately he won't be able to walk her to the bus stop. Taebin apologizes for not being able to take her, and they say their goodbyes. Dongtae remains watching his next steps. Wondering if he should keep following him, our protagonist takes the initiative. He wants to see if Taebin is really going home or not. Then we are shown what Taebin actually did on his phone. In reality, he was exchanging messages with the system, and you receive a hide-and-seek mission. As night falls, Dongtae wonders where they are going. They enter a building and climb the stairs, but doesn't seem to be Taebin's home. Staying one floor below, he keeps moving forward. They soon reach the top floor, and the handsome guy heads to the rooftop and opens the door. Our protagonist calmly walks to the door and observes, and he sees Taebin standing there as if waiting for someone. He seems to be talking to someone on the phone and waiting, and there he stays looking at a message, getting irritated but still waiting. Dongtae, already starving, feels like he won't last much longer. Unfortunately, his phone vibrates, making a noise. Our protagonist grabs the phone, hoping Taebin didn't hear it. When he looks, it's just some nerd wanting to give him a note. At that moment, he just feels grateful for the notes. But suddenly, the place starts filling with purple and pink squares, and Dongtae hears a sound he's never heard before. Something shiny, which seems to be the center of everything, catches his attention. Wondering what it could be, he reaches out to grab it. But Taebin opens the door behind him and asks who's there. The protagonist freezes in shock and is clearly recognized. Then we get a cut, and he is running nonstop. When he arrives home, he takes a deep breath, and his phone starts receiving messages. Someone unknown, whom we'll call the system, asks if he saw a ghost since he looks so scared. Dongtae yells, asking if it was Taebin. The system says it's not the handsome guy and tells him to turn on the light since he's home. That scares him and he starts asking again who it is. He begins shouting, searching for where this person is. The system tells him he's acting like a stalker, and asks if Dongtae wants to know how he knows everything. Then it jokingly asks Dongtae for money. When the boy doesn't laugh, the system notices that he's really shy. The system says it will stop teasing him and introduces itself as X, and that it can see him because of the item he picked up. They asked if he remembers the exact moment he grabbed it. We are shown the moment when Dongtae picked up the glowing item, a die. He picks it up and wonders what it is, and we see Taebin opening the door, sensing that something is wrong. The handsome guy checks his phone, and his mission is to retrieve the die from the bread distributor. He reaches out his hand and asks for the die, but our protagonist responds with a simple, okay. But the sly one tricks him and runs off with the die. Even though he doesn't know what it is, he can't give it up so easily. We are shown that the only skill he has is running away. As he runs, he sees the door and thinks he'll be safe if he can get through it. But Taebin suddenly appears, standing right in front of him. Our sly protagonist takes a punch. He is thrown backward, crashing against a door. He rolls on the ground like a sack of potatoes and can barely get up, coughing nonstop. Taebin clenches his fists and demands that he hand over the die. The protagonist questions him, saying that if he explains what the die is, then he'll give it to him. Taebin throws a punch that destroys the wall and asks if he wants to play a game. With a hole in the wall, he says that the game is to see how long our sly one can hold out before handing over the die. Terrified, he quickly remembers why he followed him there in the first place and decides he won't give up the die until he exposes Taebin. Dongtae gets up and starts running, and he says he doesn't know why it's important, so he's going to throw it away. But he gets caught and grabbed. The two start fighting over the die. They fall to the ground, still struggling. But at the moment when the die is about to be grabbed, it falls. Taebin looks shocked that Dongtae rolled the die. The die starts glowing pink, and the protagonist becomes intrigued by this color change. Then his phone starts receiving messages. X congratulates him for becoming a player. And then we cut back to his house, where he questions the meaning of the dice. The sly one picks up the die in his hand and observes it closely. He notices that the color changed after rolling it, and that Taebin stopped bothering him after that. The system asks why he seems so restless. Our protagonist asks several questions, such as what the dice are and how he is being watched. X says it will be a long conversation, so he will start with the basics. The die in his hand is a cue that can change everything. Dongtae tries to remember when he first realized the world wasn't fair, that kind words are just words, not actions, and that the people on TV live in a completely different reality. He wonders when he accepted this as a fact. Our protagonist remains silent, suspicious of X, and he asks if the system can really see everything he's doing. X reminds him that it can only see what happens around the die, like a watcher. Dongtae asks if X is some kind of god, since this kind of thing should be impossible. The system gets annoyed with all the questions, and tells him to open his closet and take out an old science book. When he grabs it and opens it to page 351, he comes across Einstein and starts reading about him. And soon he finds the words, "God does not play dice." X explains that he is not God, just an administrator. The system asks if he has any more questions about the die. Dongtae thinks for a moment, but still isn't fully convinced. X says he will explain it in a way that even an idiot like him can understand. The system asks if he likes games, and Dante replies that he plays sometimes, and then asks why games are so fun. Dante says it's because you can destroy everything, but X explains that normally games have missions with rewards that make you stronger on your journey, and he says it's fun to think that you can do anything if you try. How could real life ever be better than games? To have a life better than a game, you would have to be born into a rich family or have a special talent. With the dice, your life becomes a game. The more dice you have, the more stats you can improve, and logically, the higher the number, the more points you get. Dante asks if it can be any skill. S says it can be anything from strength to appearance and wisdom. As the system explains the missions, Dante remembers everything Tabin has done, and with each mission that arrives via message, you will be rewarded with dice. The blue die can be owned by anyone and turns red when rolled, and once rolled, the die belongs to the player, along with the number of points it landed on. Then through synchronization, the system allows you to improve any of your stats, and once the process is complete, the die returns to white. Dante says the names sound like something from a random app. X says it's simple. Just complete missions, earn dice, and change anything. Our protagonist asks if the same thing happened to Tabin. The system laughs and sends him a photo. The idiot asks who that is, and X tells him to look in the mirror. How sad must it be to be like that? And X reveals that it was Tabin some time ago. He asks when Tabin started collecting dice, and X says it was shortly before he transferred. Dante thinks it's absurd since Yeonju doesn't know anything about it. Strange noises start coming from his door, and soon he begins helping his drunk mother get up. Later, the system asks if he is going to synchronize the die or if he's going to back out halfway. He could even become better than Tabin. Dante holds the die but tries to resist using it. Since all of this can't be explained so easily, he thinks about Yeonju, and he declares that he's going to use the die. That night, after using the dice for the first time, he collected more during the holiday and over the weekend. Our Sly One comments on how easy the missions are, like taking out the trash. And thanks to them, he has become more handsome and intelligent. With a happy feeling as if cheating in the game of life, when Monday arrives, Dante walks to school in the rain, wondering what people will think of him. As soon as he opens the door, one of the motherless ones immediately orders him to go fetch a drink. But when he turns around, he is surprised. Everyone in the classroom starts asking what happened, and if this person is really the useless one. As our protagonist walks to his seat, everyone comments on how he even looks taller. One of the motherless ones slaps another on the head. They know it's still him, but they seem intimidated. Motherless Jr. steps forward and starts asking if he's wearing insoles or something. The leader of the motherless ones also asks what he did to his skin. And when Dante doesn't answer, they ask if he's scared. Looking down at them, he realizes they don't seem as threatening anymore. Observing the bruise on his arm, he finds them ridiculous. What once caused him overwhelming fear now seems like nothing. As our protagonist clenches his fists, thinking of standing up to them, one of the motherless ones suddenly intimidates him, and he instantly returns to being afraid. He quickly remembers that he only upgraded his appearance and physique, and regrets not choosing at least some strength. He quickly grabs his backpack and asks if they only want 3 sodas, and our useless protagonist runs off to get them. As he passes by, everyone notices how much he has changed, and Dante recalls how he has always been just a bread distributor at this school. He runs with them, thinking about which attribute to upgrade next. He quickly hands them over and says he bought cheese bread since there wasn't enough soda. The motherless one looks at him with complete disdain and grabs him, accusing him of doing it on purpose. He quickly notices people murmuring, realizing he's no longer invisible. The motherless one snatches the bag from him and lets it go. He complains that Dante does everything wrong and says they need to replace him, calling for Byungchul. Our nerd panics upon hearing his name mentioned, and the motherless one announces that from now on, Byungchul will be the one to buy things, as he was somewhat close to the protagonist. While the nerd desperately tries to escape this, Dante is dismissed from his position. Suddenly, someone arrives and asks him how he got so tall. Then another person comes, asking about his freckles. Soon he is flooded with positive comments, just as he had always dreamed. For a moment, he feels proud, as he has never received this kind of attention before. But he can't be completely happy, because the focus quickly shifts to someone else. A girl says she must have deleted his number and asks for it again. He can't wait for Yeonju to return from her rehearsal and see him. The moment she opens the door, our protagonist seems delighted. But soon he feels uncomfortable because Tabin is right behind her. Dante glares at him, making sure he understands that he's no longer the only dice player. Meanwhile, Yeonju is surprised by how much our useless protagonist has changed. She immediately starts asking about his height and what he did over the weekend. He hesitates, unsure of what to say, and blurts out that he went to visit a temple. But then he realizes how stupid that sounds. Only the god of mercy would accept him. Unju takes his hand and congratulates him. Our protagonist turns red at her touch and thinks that living up to this moment was worth it just to experience this. He simply thanks her for her kindness, but then Tabin grabs her from behind. She asks what he's doing since everyone is watching. Tabin says that Dante should congratulate them too, because they are finally in a relationship, leaving our protagonist frozen in shock. And he asks if Dante will congratulate them. With his heart pounding and his emotions in turmoil, everyone tells him to stop doing this in the classroom and to find a room instead. While Tabin laughs along with everyone, Dante feels like he just got stabbed in the chest. He feels like Luke losing his arm to Darth Vader, like he just took a kick from Leonidas of Sparta. His pride on the very first day of class was thrown off a cliff. With the dice, Dante thought he had finally reached the heavens. Sitting down, he listens as the team thanks Tabin for scoring the final goal, and they call them lucky for dating such a beautiful girl. Someone asks how close they really are, and Tabin casually says they're just students. The others start teasing, saying they must have kissed. and he quickly leaves with people assuming he's just embarrassed. As he walks away, he exchanges a glance with Dante, smiling smugly. And that instantly enrages our protagonist. Dante stands up and starts calling for the system, saying, "Hey." X responds that he already said his name and it's not "Hey," and he asks if he could take points from someone else. The system says that's a really strange idea since points are usually used to improve one's own stats. He asked about going back in time, erasing someone's memories, or even breaking up couples. The system asks if he's really that upset about what's happening. Dante demands a new mission immediately because he needs dice. The system says it's busy reading a book and tells him to call back later. Our protagonist looks like he's about to have a full-blown rage attack after hearing that. He says that Taeben also used the dice to become handsome, so how could someone like him end up with Yeonju? On his first day, Dante didn't know anyone in his new school, but Yeonju started talking to him since they had come from the same middle school. He blushed when she spoke to him. Later, he was kicked around by the motherless group. Walking to the music room, he watched her sing, and he just stood there in complete silence, as if he could never reach her. Dante thought he would finally have his chance when he became a player and regrets not discovering the dice sooner, because the person sitting next to her should have been him. As he walks, he sees the two of them sitting together, and their relationship, unfortunately, seemed to be going really well. Taeben hugs her, making her flustered. Dante freezes, watching that moment that should have been his. But even after collecting so many dice, it still isn't him. And just like before, he ends up running away. Taeben did it on purpose, knowing our protagonist was there. Eunju asks if someone was nearby, but as always, he says no. As he runs, he can't forget the two of them hugging, and his chest fills with rage. Not paying attention, he ends up bumping into a girl. She apologizes and asks if he's okay. But our protagonist simply replies that it wasn't her fault. Feeling hopeless, he just stares upward. When suddenly, a student asks if he's Dante from her class, and also what he's doing there standing around. As he struggles to remember her name, he responds that he was just getting some fresh air. Hiding her cigarette, she says she's doing the same. He goes back to being quiet and sad. She comments that he suddenly looks really cool since his face and skin have improved a lot. But he also seems more mature mentally. Our useless protagonist feels flattered by the compliments, when suddenly, his phone starts vibrating, and he excuses himself to check his messages. S says he was reading and remembered that Dante was begging for dice, saying that he put together a few missions for the poor guy. The system asks if Dante wants to accept the mission, and of course he does. And soon, they start being sent. The depressed one looks shocked after reading the missions. The missions involve complimenting the girl, going out with her, and touching her magic balloon. Looking at her, our warrior trembles. He doesn't even know her name. Dante asks what kind of missions these are, and X simply replies that he asked for dice. Even though he hesitates, the number of dice is massive, even more than he has collected up until now. He wonders if he should complete it since he'll probably never see her again in his life, and questions whether he should act crazy just to touch the magic balloon. But then he quickly remembers that's a crime and that he'd go straight to jail, and realizes that no die is worth a life behind bars. But thinking about the other missions, they seem possible to complete. Looking at her, he thinks it's just a compliment. Filling his chest with air, he finally calls her beautiful. At the exact moment, she has a cigarette in her mouth. Turning to Dante, she asks if she heard him right and says her ears are turning red. She throws the cigarette away and runs off because class is about to start. Our sly one feels awful for lying to her, but he still ends up earning 5 dice. He pulls out his phone and X asks if he's going to do the next mission. Dante asks how he's supposed to do something like that. X says these missions are simple. He just has to do them, adding a suspicious emoji at the end. Our protagonist starts thinking about all these coincidences and wonders if X might actually be a god, since he gives both the dice and the missions. And there he is, trying to figure out the reason behind it all. The system reminds him that he was the one who begged for a bunch of dice. But our useless one says he doesn't know how to complete this mission. X explains that the harder the mission, the more dice he will earn. He asks if Taeben does missions like this. The system pretends not to know anything. Soon we see our nerd suffering at the hands of the motherless group, and Taeben stares seriously at our protagonist as he walks in. Then we see a beautiful sky with the two of them standing on a rooftop. Taeben asks what he wants, and our sly protagonist asks if he is really dating her. Taeben sarcastically asks if there are people who pretend to like each other, but Dante asks if he loves her or if he's just completing a mission. He talks about how Yeonju is kind, beautiful, and popular. There's no reason not to like her. Then Dante says that Taeben is just playing with her feelings, but Taeben replies that this is an issue between him and Yeonju. Dante yells that he can't accept this because she doesn't know who Taeben really is. But then the handsome guy asks if he has the moral right to say that, since he's just jealous and wants to be like him. Dante responds that he doesn't want to lie to anyone just for a mission, but then he remembers that he lied to the anonymous girl earlier. Taeben smirks and says that he's becoming more honest. Telling him to shut up, our protagonist runs away, and he convinces himself that he's different, that Yeonju was just deceived. Suddenly, he runs into her on the way, but when she asks where Taeben is, he bolts again. He promises to complete many missions and collect a lot of dice to become better, but he ends up tripping on the stairs. Someone asks if he's okay, but still on the ground, he remains focused on greeting Yeonju. At 8 o'clock at night, when the school is completely empty, our protagonist sneaks in before the security guard locks up. He enters through a window he left open earlier and grabs a girl's uniform from his class. Sweating nervously, he questions if this mission is really necessary. X tells him that he accepted it, but only to surpass Taeben. He really wonders what kind of mission this is, having to take the girl's uniform and clean it. Then he moves on to the next mission, marking books with a pen. The mission is to mark the guilty in borrowed books. Our protagonist starts doing everything, even tearing out the answer page from someone's math book. Dante keeps completing missions, thinking X is just messing with him, but he continues collecting dice. As the week passes, our protagonist changes constantly. Dante throws a baseball far into the distance. Everyone is impressed and the girls scream. A student wonders since when he got so good at sports. With his grades improving, his popularity only increases and no one disrespects him anymore. He feels like he's getting further and further away from his past self, but he's bothered because those two never look at him shining. They really seem to be living their own romance. He wonders how they're doing, if they already kissed, or when they meet up. And they're probably studying together all the time. Dunking his head in water, he realizes he's the only one worried about this, and just feels like an idiot. While the girls talk about how different he is, they also mention rumors that he's dating someone. They ask Yoonju, but one of them interrupts, saying she already has a boyfriend, while Yoonju remains silent. Dante asks how many dice Taeban has collected so far, but X says that as a manager, he can't disclose that. So Dante asks what kind of book he's reading. The system says it's reading a funny book called the Bible, and Dante spoils it by saying Jesus dies. X gets annoyed by this, and our protagonist says that he revives later. Our protagonist then sees the nerd being beaten and realizes it's the motherless ones again. Seeing his friend in that state, he decides to forget about his mission, and remembers when no one noticed him in that same situation. While kidding the nerd, one of the motherless ones orders him to take off his glasses, saying he won't feel guilty at a time like this. Dante yells at them, saying they're messing with someone from his class. One of them recognizes him as another bread distributor and thinks they're going crazy. But in the blink of an eye, the sly one throws his first punch, launching the motherless one far away. Everyone is shocked. With his injured hand, Dante realizes he should have put points into endurance and tells them not to do anything since their friend is already down. One of them screams and charges at him with a kick, but our protagonist easily dodges. To compensate for his lack of endurance, he invested heavily in agility, so he lands a punch and takes him down effortlessly. While the nerd stands in disbelief, the protagonist is surprised by the strength he now has. With all the motherless ones on the ground, Dante picks up his friend's glasses and hands them back. The nerd, in tears, can't believe it. Furious, he slaps his own glasses. The protagonist says he already took care of those guys, but the nerd says he feels no gratitude at all because it's all Dante's fault. But he wouldn't know that now that he's so popular. The nerd says he tried his best to stay unnoticed by the motherless ones. Dante never imagined things would turn out this way. In tears, the nerd tells him to shut up. There's a rule in the classroom. If it's not you suffering, it doesn't matter who is. And he says Dante is just like those people. Dante realizes that this is what Taeban meant in their last conversation. With everyone on the ground crying, the system asks someone to shut the nerd up. Byung-chul asks what he should do now. Our sly protagonist suddenly shouts his name. He remembers that the nerd said he would give away one of his 2 photos of an idol. As he stands there, he doesn't seem to understand anything. The protagonist throws a die in his direction. He catches it, staring intently at the glowing die. X freaks out, asking what the hell he's doing. The sly one smiles and congratulates him on his good catch. By nightfall, our protagonist is on the rooftop. As his clothes sway in the wind, he asks X if he's reading something, and if the nerd rolled the die he received. Counting their new player, they now have 3 known players, so he asks how many are out there. But the system just gives the same vague response to all his questions. He gets irritated and asks if X is mad just because he gave a die to a friend. X says he isn't upset, but rather busy, since he has to take care of all the players. No player wants their identity revealed because it would be problematic if ordinary people found out, so he won't say anything. He asks if Dante is happy with that, and why he gave the die to that kid. Our protagonist looks at that question, but he doesn't remember why. He's sure he had a good reason for giving it away, and sarcastically, X tells him to increase his intelligence stat. Our protagonist just laughs at the joke. While looking at the horizon, he says he just wanted to give the die because he knows what it's like to be just a bread delivery boy. X warns that the nerd might spread the game, but Dante says that's impossible since it would ruin his advantage of being one of the few players. He says X is asking too many questions about the die. The system says everything could have been better. Our protagonist doesn't understand at the moment, but he thinks things will get more interesting. At school, everyone seems to be talking normally. As the protagonist walks by, he hears the motherless group complaining that the nerd hasn't arrived yet. Dante figures he might have stayed up late thinking about which stat to increase. He imagines the possibilities. Maybe the nerd became handsome or even good at sports. When he opens the door, our protagonist looks straight ahead, already knowing who just arrived. The nerd who walks in looks the same as always, still staring at the ground with a frightened look. He wonders if Byung-chul leveled up something different, as he watches him walk like the same sad kid as before. He thinks about the sadness in his expression and whether he didn't know how to use the dice properly. As he sits down, our protagonist realizes he'll have to ask him. But as he stands up, he sees the motherless one already picking on the nerd. The guy takes the nerd's notebook and says some students from another class are looking for him. Byung-chul demands he give his notes back. The motherless one throws the notebook on the ground and asks if it's dirty now that he switched classes. Looking at the nerd's head, he says he sees a gray hair, and when there's one, it should be pulled out. He grabs his hair and yanks some strands out while the others laugh. With his head down, the nerd weakly asks him to stop, but the guy keeps going, saying he pulled out the wrong strand. The protagonist looks at the scene with disgust. He clenches his fists in rage. As the motherless one continues pulling, he says he'll get the right one this time. The moment he pulls, Byung-chul snaps in anger. He raises his hand and yells, telling him to stop before landing a punch on the motherless one's ribs, breaking them. The guy is sent flying across the classroom, crashing into the chairs before hitting the wall. Everyone in the room watches in stunned silence, from our protagonist to the background characters. Then we see the nerd standing up from his seat, and the motherless one lying completely wrecked on the floor. As the others start shouting, some talk about calling the ambulance. While everyone rushes out to get a teacher, Dante just stands there, still completely silent, watching the nerd smile after doing that. Still smiling, he turns and thanks our protagonist for giving him that power. Still shocked at what he just did, he asks if this is what it feels like to feel good. As we see Dante frozen in disbelief, the nerd is just happy that he will never have to obey anyone again. And he turns to our protagonist, finally considering him a true friend. As the nerd walks away slowly, Anju looks at him, confused and scared. Some people stand frozen, while others rush to help the motherless one. But as Byung-chul walks past, no one moves a finger or says anything to him. The boy on the ground is helped up by his friends, coughing weakly. One of the motherless ones yells, asking why he did that to a friend and if he has lost his mind. The moment he hears the word friend, the nerd stops. He turns back and asks who exactly was his friend there. The person who hits him for not answering correctly. The one who throws him into dirty water just for fun. The nerd starts stepping forward again. As he clenches his fist, the extra trembles in fear. Suddenly, Dante appears in front of him, asking him to calm down a little. He compliments his speed, but questions why he's defending those people, politely asking to be let through, thinking that at the very least, the protagonist would understand him. But Dante stops him, saying that the motherless one is already finished, and if this escalates, it won't be good for anyone, especially him. The nerd puts his hand on his head and asks if that was a threat, and if it's just because he's fast. Then he asks if Dante wants to fight. Clenching his fists, he wonders who would win, strength or speed. He keeps repeating that he didn't mean that and doesn't want to fight at all. He asks again to be let through, but Tabin interferes, telling them to stop because they're crossing the line. The nerd turns and glares at him, asking who he is. The three of them stand still, staring at each other, because even the slightest movement could trigger a fight. However, the teacher suddenly arrives, asking what's going on, and rushes to help the motherless one. Byung-chul seems restless when suddenly his arm pulses. He immediately clutches it, clearly in pain. Then he dashes out of the classroom. Our protagonist tries to go after him, but Tabin grabs his hand, stopping him, and asks if he gave the die to the nerd. While he questions why Dante would do that, our protagonist overhears students calling an ambulance for the motherless one. Nervously, Dante insists that the nerd isn't like that he was probably just overwhelmed by everything. Still in shock over the situation, he thinks that he didn't give him the die for this. Tabin pressures him, asking if he's going to start handing out stolen dice like charity now. With force, our protagonist yanks his hand away and tells Tabin to stop being selfish, since he also became a dice player just the same. Then he takes off running again, rushing through the school, searching for Byung-chul. Suddenly, through the crack of a door, he spots the nerd curled up and seemingly in great pain. Our protagonist knocks on the door, saying that he finally found him. The nerd flinches, startled, and turns around. He looks at our protagonist with a desperate expression, while holding onto his left arm, which clearly doesn't look okay. Dante asks what happened and if his arm will be alright. The nerd replies that it's nothing and lowers his head. Then he asks how, in just one day, Dante gained all that strength, and if he spent the entire night collecting dice. Byung-chul suddenly bursts into laughter. Then he reaches into his pocket and tosses 6 dice onto the desk, stating that he gathered that amount in just one night. Our protagonist is stunned, because that shouldn't be enough to gain that much strength. The nerd laughs and says that Dante really knows nothing about dice, and that's why he only used them for his looks. Byung-chul explains that at first he thought it was all fake. After all, how could a magical die be real? But he was shocked to find out it was true the moment he rolled it, and he wonders, what exactly is this magical die? Because it's driving him crazy. With this power, they could completely change the laws of nature and human existence. He keeps questioning in different ways if it's possible to prove this ability through science. That's why he ran tests, experimented, and gathered some data about certain dice. X chimes in saying that, theoretically, you can enhance any ability you want. You can completely surpass the limits of the human race, or not. If you increase human endurance enough, you could deflect bullets. And with no limits, how many meters could you jump with your bare hands? Could you stop a speeding car? The nerd, lost in thought, relentlessly questions, what are the true limits? Byung-chul seems to be completely mesmerized as he talks about the subject, and he explains that the easiest thing to test at the moment was strength, so he used a contact tester to provide data for his research. He discovered something interesting, because the more you concentrate on a skill, the greater the change. Compared to using dice on the entire body, if you focus them only on your arms or the palm of your hand, the difference in strength is enormous. You could call it a restricted amplification to a specific part of the body. That's why his right arm doesn't look much different from his left arm. But when he presses down on the desk in front of him, he completely crushes the wood, proving that his left arm is on a completely different level in terms of strength. Holding a piece of the shattered wood, he crumbles it in his hand. Dante asks if that wouldn't be harmful to his body. The nerd says it does seem pretty unbalanced, and it's more like a potential energy that he can tap into, making him invincible. The protagonist asks what would happen if he increased the skill even more. And the nerd says that now that he thinks about it, he's having all kinds of new ideas. He stays silent, seeming uncertain about all this new information regarding dice. Byung-chul starts thinking again, if he can exceed human limitations, he might reach something that no one has ever dreamed of having, like telekinesis or telepathy. Our protagonist is completely amazed that he even mentions psychic powers and looks at him asking if, for example, the nerd could actually do that. And unfortunately, he responds that he can't. But he explains that he can't yet, but someday he might get there. He says he tried using dice to obtain psychic abilities, and when he rolled one of his dice, X asked which skill he wanted to level up. The sly one said he wanted the ability to see through things, for profit of course. But an error occurred when trying to upgrade that particular skill. He says that what X told him left him completely shocked. He pulls out his phone and shows a message explaining that the skill he requested has not yet been unlocked in the skill tree. Our protagonist widens his eyes, surprised by the message. Byung-chul is happy to know that it wasn't impossible, just not available yet. Just like a child who has never walked but suddenly becomes able to run, or a person who has never ridden a bike but starts riding perfectly using dice, they can do things they never thought possible. It's just a matter of uncovering the secrets of how to achieve it and making the dice grant them psychic abilities, for example. When they arrive, they see an ambulance with its sirens blaring. The protagonist watches through the crack of a window. Soon, the nerd asks him what kind of missions he has completed so far. Our protagonist feels a bit embarrassed. Remembering everything he's done, he just responds that they were normal missions. The nerd asks if they were related to math or hacking, but Dante says he's never done anything like that. As if he's reaching a conclusion, a girl appears and tells the teacher that they were in the classroom. The genius explains that missions are different for each player, just like how different races in games start in different locations. Everything happens according to X's will. Dante turns when he hears him talk about overcoming this obstacle. He quickly leaves when he sees that everyone is arriving in the classroom. Outside the school, we see a beautiful sky, and the protagonist walks while thinking about how things reached this point, because all he wanted was to help his friend who had suffered so much. He remembers Byung-chul's gratitude for receiving the die. After all this, he's not sure if he really helped him, and he wonders how Byung-chul felt after hearing and seeing all those things. Now that he stops to analyze it, he realizes he never got the photos. As he walks, he recalls that his friend was suspended, since even if the teachers don't believe what happened, there's no way so many students could be lying. He makes a strange face while typing on his phone. In the message, he tells his dear friend not to do anything reckless and that he'll take notes for him. With his phone vibrating on a table, we see that his house is in complete chaos after the news of his 3-day suspension. His father says that this will affect his grades. His parents start blaming each other for how they raise him. As a plate falls to the ground, his mother yells that all his father cares about is money and not the family. Byung-chul seems bored in his room as he listens to everything, thinking that everyone just tries to be normal without considering anything else. Then he starts typing, completely focused. As he writes, he says that with the dice, someone like him could dominate the world, for example, instead of following this normal and boring life. As night falls, we see our protagonist building, and there he is, worried about his friend and frustrated that he's not responding, wondering if the nerd is really trying to gain powers. In a thought, we see a host calling a guest to the stage. The audience is thrilled to hear that someone will showcase psychic powers. Then the nerd appears, dressed like a monk, now showing that he can float with his powers. In an interview, the hosts ask the next person to introduce themselves. That's when our protagonist steps up and says he can levitate objects, and they ask him to demonstrate. In brief and sarcastic thought, he manages to lift something. Back in reality, he realizes that powers like that are completely useless in the real world. What the dice allow him to enhance is already great. His phone vibrates and he thinks it's his friend, but it's X saying that they are there with him. Our protagonist says that she's noisy. The system asks why he's so down since he was doing great with all the girls texting him. X starts reading off some of the messages, some of which are pretty embarrassing, and Dante tells her not to look at other people's messages. But soon, she brings up Yeonju. The protagonist says that Yeonju isn't the type to send messages. He asks if his friend will be okay and if it's really possible to do that kind of thing with a dice. But X says they are just a GM and can't say, saying that as long as the rules aren't broken, everything will be fine, and that just as some seek beauty, others seek power. Their goal is simply to observe all the players, watching their ambitions and achievements. Dante wonders what the handsome guy wished for with his dice. Meanwhile, the nerd is deep in his research. He wakes up to strange noises around the house. Someone has arrived. His mother informs him that a classmate is here to see him. Curious, he turns to go meet them. Looking at the moon, he sees that it's Tabin. The nerd walks down the stairs and stops the moment he sees him, clenching his fists as soon as he spots him. He demands to know why he's here. The handsome guy tells him not to worry about his visit, explaining that no one likes when things get this big, much less drawing attention, and he asks him to go somewhere quieter and more secluded. In the heavy rain, we hear loud rumbles as a scene from a year ago begins to unfold. As the elevator doors open, we see a boy crying, lost in his thoughts, wishing he had never been born ugly. But something that was determined at birth can never be changed. When he reaches his destination, he walks onto the rooftop, stepping into the rain, and climbs over the railing, holding on with his hands, consumed by his torment. When he looks down from the building, he remembers how everyone in his school mistreated him as if he weren't even human. Surrounded by these overwhelming thoughts, he wonders if, through death, he might finally find freedom and happiness. With both feet now on the edge of the building, something suddenly falls. Out of nowhere, a watermelon crashes to the ground, completely smashed. Still trapped in his mental battle, the boy gasps for breath, entertaining the terrible thought that if he were to break, he would finally be free. He thinks that none of his classmates would care about his tragic departure, but reconsidering, he realizes he can't die just because of people like them. Unsure of what to do, he wonders what path he should take. In the midst of his loneliness, footsteps echo behind him. Someone asks him to give them his life since he's about to throw it away. When the boy turns to see who it is, unfortunately, he slips, his body left suspended in the air. The figure manages to catch him, gripping his hand tightly. But as they try to pull him up, the boy starts struggling, trying to let himself fall. His shoe slips off and drops from the building. He looks at the sheer height of the fall. Tears start streaming down his face as he finally begs to be saved. The hooded figure tells him that today he has died. The boy cries, his eyes overflowing with emotions. But the person explains that he has also been reborn, pulling him back up onto the rooftop of the towering building. Lying on the ground, the boy is still overwhelmed by his turmoil. The person tells him happy birthday, with his gift in hand, a die. We see the glowing die marking the beginning of a new story for the boy. He also seems to realize just by looking at it that his life will change the moment he picks it up. Looking at the large moon in the sky, Tabin stands there, watching from a distance. The nerd asks him about the place and why he had to turn off his phone just to talk to him. The handsome one stays strangely quiet, observing the area. But he says this place is good for watching. And now with the phone off or without cameras, X won't be able to see or hear their conversations. He says he just wanted to check something. Byung-chul gets annoyed that he called him out here just for that, but says that he also wants to check something with Tabin. Then the nerd suddenly lunges at him and throws a powerful punch in his direction. But Tabin dodges and the wall behind him shatters on impact. The handsome one gets a cut on his cheek, and the nerd's hand continues destroying everything in its path, but Tabin keeps dodging. Looking ahead, he spots an opening, and immediately lands a solid kick on his opponent, which sends Byung-chul flying and ends up breaking his arm. He asks why this is happening, and the nerd simply confirms that Tabin is also a player. Our genius connects the dots. Tabin's arrival, Dante suddenly becoming handsome, meaning it's highly likely that Tabin gave the dice to the protagonist. Clenching his fists, he wonders how much his abilities have been upgraded. Preparing another powerful punch, he says he needs to know his real strength. Tabin smirks, thinking this guy is just crazy. Our nerd shouts, asking if Tabin has supernatural powers. Tabin looks confused by the question. Byung-chul explains that X only said the abilities weren't unlocked yet, and someone like Tabin must have them since he's at a higher level. The handsome one tells him to stop reading so many mangas, because that's impossible. Even if such powers did exist, he wouldn't have a reason to use them. He also points out that the nerd's left arm is in pretty bad shape after using it. He steps forward, betting on whether the nerd will use his powers or not. Tabin calmly watches as his opponent approaches. Byung-chul suddenly leaps into the air to strike him with a punch. A loud explosion-like sound follows. At our protagonist's house, we see him deep in thought, thinking about the dice since he still doesn't know much about them. So he decides to research more about them online. He finds descriptions of how they can be used, and all sorts of board games appear. But then he comes across an old game where rolling a high number meant living a happy life, while rolling a low number meant living a terrible one. From a king to a servant, our protagonist realizes that people from the past aren't so different from those today. Dante remembers his dream from the beginning of the story, and his conversation with X, who isn't God but has surpassed all humans. Then we cut back to the battle with the area completely destroyed. The nerd pulls his hand from the shattered ground. He asks how long the handsome one plans to keep dodging, but he only sees Tabin staggering in front of him. Seeing that fuels his rage, and he prepares another powerful punch, which is effortlessly stopped by Tabin, who pushes him aside, leaving him wide open, with his opponent now sending a massive kick in his direction. Strangely, we cut back to the protagonist, who is discovering more about different types of dice, and that rolling dice can also be considered similar to flipping coins. We see the nerd hitting the ground, severely injured. A coin falls from his pocket and spins, something that might be important later. Tabin slowly approaches him and asks if he wants to stop fighting now. The nerd tells him to shut up, still ready to fight, but unfortunately, his arm reached its limit a while ago, causing him immense pain. Tabin threatens him for his recklessness with the dice, saying that if he keeps going, he'll have his hands ripped off so he can never roll them again. He starts walking away, telling the nerd to stop thinking he's powerful, but Byung-chul asks if he knows anything about X and if they've met before. The handsome one says he doesn't know anything. Our nerd smirks because he knows something that no one else seems to realize about the system. Our protagonist walks, thinking about how days have passed without any messages from his friend or his beloved, only from people who weren't important to the last romantic. He comments on how the classroom feels more peaceful. The only thing different was the 2 empty chairs, but everyone ignored them, and he starts wondering if his friend will really stay quiet about the suspension. Our protagonist watches the happy couple in his class when someone steps in front of him and calls his name. It was the smoker girl asking what he was doing. She invites him for a coffee, and he accepts. They comment that the exams are getting a bit tough and complicated and ask how Dante is doing with his studies. Our cheater says he's studying, but in reality he's just increasing his intelligence using the dice. On a very pleasant day, he orders some food from a store, jumping with joy as he finally holds his own meal in his hands. Because until now, he had always bought food for others, never for himself. Suddenly, he spots the nerd walking down the street. Without hesitation, our protagonist doesn't waste any time. He says he has to step out for a bit and runs after his friend, stopping in front of the nerd and reminding him that he's still suspended. His friend seems off, so he assures him that he just came to talk. The nerd asks what skills he has leveled up with the dice during this time, and our protagonist admits he focused on intelligence since exams are coming up. Then he asks if Byung-chul is feeling hot wearing those clothes, but the nerd simply says that he has learned something about X. Our protagonist finds that fascinating, but then his other classmates arrive. He tries to talk to the nerd, but with everyone there, his friend says he'll tell him later. The smoker girl teases him for being near the school while suspended, but the protagonist says he's just visiting. He then says goodbye to his friend, telling him he'll see him tomorrow. Once the nerd is alone, he seems strange, with his arm and hand oddly covered. Then he pulls out his phone and sees a new message, and he smiles upon reading that he has a mission. But it's dangerous. His new objective is to set fire to the school. Time passes and it begins to get dark. A few students walk nervously, afraid because they're leaving school late. They comment about rumors of ghosts in the area. Among the bushes, someone is hiding. One of the girls notices and starts to feel scared. They are hidden in the plants. We see the nerd holding a gasoline canister. At home, the protagonist feels uneasy because his friend didn't seem normal in their last conversation. So he quickly gets up from bed and grabs his phone, asking about the time he gave the die to Byung-chul. X had said it was a good idea, but suddenly the screen starts acting weird. He notices that his message is just disappearing. Out of nowhere, his friend knocks on the door and steps inside. Dante asks what he's doing there at this hour, but the nerd only says that his left arm feels different, and as he turns, we see that his arm is falling apart. The protagonist wakes up from this nightmare, feeling restless. He just wants to get some fresh air. He grabs his phone and sees a message from Byung-chul, saying that he has a lot of information to share tomorrow. Dante just stares at the message, realizing there's nothing to do but wait. The nerd walks up the stairs, reflecting on how the world is like a perfect machine that never stops spinning. But everything is so boring, studying, going to college, maybe making money. The dice freed him from that machine, and so as he digs deeper into his research, he uncovers some important secrets. With the gasoline canister in hand, staring at his phone, when the clock strikes exactly midnight, the school bell rings out in all directions. His first mission is complete. After collecting his dice, he is immediately ready for the next objective. The nerd begins pouring gasoline around the school. He gets the idea to enter a classroom and finish there to make it look like an accident, just as the mission instructs. But suddenly, the alarm starts blaring throughout the entire school. Byung-chul didn't know there was such a system, and he starts panicking. As he stumbles over a desk, the gasoline spills everywhere. And just like that, he completes another mission. Still trembling and drenched in sweat, he claims his reward of 7 dice. With only one mission left, he hears the security guard coming up the stairs. Shaking with fear at the thought of getting caught, he grabs a lighter to finish the job. As he lights it, he burns himself from the heat and drops it by accident. Byung-chul says he did everything, even though he never actually lit the fire. But X comments that it looked pretty fake when he dropped the lighter. The security guards start rushing toward the classroom. Our nerd screams, demanding that the system give him the dice immediately. X says he's terrifying and agrees to hand over his reward. The glow appears, and he wastes no time grabbing the dice. Then he bolts out of the room, pulling up his hood. The guards spot him leaving. They shine their lights on him. He immediately sprints away, determined not to be caught. A guard appears at the stairs, blocking his path. He asks who's there, but our nerd is completely frozen in shock. He finds himself in a complicated situation where he doesn't know what to do. Unable to use his left arm and without time to roll the dice, he realizes he needs to hide somehow. Suddenly, the guards lose sight of him and can't tell where the intruder went. But one guard becomes suspicious of a window, with his flashlight pointing toward a bathroom window. He walks around, carefully looking in all directions. But when he reaches the window, he just starts smoking. Next to the window, we see Byung-chul hanging from a pipe. But the pipe doesn't look very stable, and the guard won't leave the window. However, his colleagues say that the intruder must have already escaped. The man soon leaves the window and joins his friends. By sheer bad luck, as he leaves, the guard ends up closing the window. Our protagonist receives a mission from X to distract the guards and open the window on the 5th floor. Dante wonders what kind of mission. This is when he has no idea it's to save his precious friend. As he leaves home and says goodbye to his mother, he thinks about how strange it was to have that nightmare and then immediately receive a mission like this. Unfortunately, it is revealed that Dante rejected the mission. Then he sees Eunju walking down the street. Our romantic immediately approaches her, and she comments that she isn't used to seeing him at this hour of the morning. He says he must be working hard to leave so early. Eunju simply says it's because of the choir. They soon talk about an upcoming choir competition, because he heard about it from Taebin, which seems to make Eunju really happy. They both find it odd that there's no teacher at the gate, since even earlier there's always someone watching over the students. Both of them notice that something is wrong. The students are gathered in a specific area, with the teachers telling everyone to leave. We see an ambulance parked in front of the school. Everyone is saying that someone fell from the rooftop during the night. The protagonist immediately connects everything to his mission, and asks Eunju to wait right there. Amidst the crowd of students, he pushes forward. After being shoved multiple times, he finally reaches the scene, and his eyes widen in shock. Seeing that in front of him leaves him completely frozen. When Eunju catches up and asks what happened, he quickly turns toward her and covers her eyes so she won't see. She asks why he's covering her eyes like that, but Dante simply says he will explain later and that for now, it's better if she doesn't look. And there he stands frozen, staring at his fallen friend on the ground. Some say he jumped from the rooftop at night, but since it's locked, that would be difficult. When our protagonist really focuses, he realizes that his mission was to save his friend. Then we see Byung-chul trying to move from the pipe to the window. And as he jumps, by some luck, he manages to grab onto the window, with his left arm injured and the dice in his pocket. He doesn't seem to find any way out. His left arm starts hurting again. Because of that, our nerd ends up falling. When they cover the victim's body, Dante tells Eunju to go to the classroom, and he just starts walking, demanding X tell him why his friend is dead. The system says his death is unfortunate and seems to speak with sarcasm. The protagonist gets furious because X says his friend died because of him. He suddenly remembers that the thing his friend wanted to talk about was probably a secret about the system. Right in front of him, a girl passes by with a die in her hand. Dante steps forward and asks where she found it, telling her to give it back, but she says others have taken some as well. When he realizes what's happening, we see that many people have dice out of curiosity, but when he tries to snatch a die from a student's hand, he accidentally spins it, and the student immediately receives a message. We then see that all the dice Byung-chul had in his coat pocket fell and scattered. When it's no longer possible to contain the students, the protagonist asks if X can't stop this, but the system doesn't see any reason to interfere, because when Dante gave his dice away, it was an act of charity to help someone. So now that everyone has dice, they can help even more people. He asks what X is thinking and what his plan is. The system once again sarcastically says that it's just helping a few people, and says that it didn't come into this world to bring peace. Meanwhile, several students are becoming players. And X says, I only brought you the knife. It's up to you to decide what to do with it. Dante and Taebin realize that things will change drastically from now on. A few days later, the teacher asks everyone to be quiet, because now he's going to announce the test scores. When the first place student scores a perfect 100, everyone applauds. The teacher mentions that there were others who also scored 100. Then he tosses the test papers into the air because everyone had passed with a perfect score. He thanks Dante, saying it was all thanks to him. Our protagonist finds it strange to hear that and sees everyone thanking him for everything. But soon, he begins to feel overwhelmed as he is surrounded by his classmates. Byung-chul appears behind him, stating that he knew he was a true friend. Then suddenly, Dong-tae wakes up from yet another nightmare. He runs his hand through his hair, relieved to realize it was just a dream. A new message pops up on his phone, informing him about his best friend's funeral. We see that our protagonist is not okay. He just wants to wake up from this terrible nightmare. Byung-chul's funeral takes place a week after the incident, and unfortunately, his parents found out that he had planned to set fire to the school. Dong-tae picks up a white flower to place on his friend's casket, but deep down he knows something is off. Byung-chul was too smart to die like this. He asks X about the mission his friend received at school, but the system only responds that accepting the mission might not have made a difference anyway. With his friends at the funeral, the only question that lingers is whether it's possible to stop a die that is spiraling out of control. Apparently, our protagonist didn't just sit still. He collected dice, but he doesn't want Unju to know, unsure of how she would react. A few adults leave the funeral, murmuring about what could have driven him to do such a thing. One of his classmates mentions that similar cases have occurred in other schools, but reassures Dong-tae that he doesn't need to worry since his grades are good. Walking absent-mindedly, he accidentally bumps into someone and quickly apologizes before they walk away. The boy with bangs simply glances at our protagonist and smiles, then continues moving forward. The others wonder who he is to just bump into someone and walk off. While our protagonist just watches in silence, the others say that the guy must have been looking for a fight. But Dong-tae knows he's a dicer. He suddenly takes off running, telling his friends to go ahead. But in the middle of a crowded street, he loses sight of him completely. Moving through so many people makes it impossible to find him. Back at school, everything seems peaceful and normal. But not for our protagonist, who has lost a friend. Everyone else seems fine. Students play handball. Others leave in groups to hang out. And as always, school gossip spreads about new couples forming. Meanwhile, a goal was fiercely scored. Some students began to discuss the immense progress of the scorer, but Dong-tae didn't give it much thought. After that, he passed by some other students asking someone about his sudden loss of weight, making him speculate that all of this was the power of the dice in action. Our depressed hero kept walking until he reached a classroom with two shadows in it. Dong-tae was intrigued by these two familiar faces. The girl wasn't feeling comfortable. Our hero recognized his crush. He speculated that she was arguing with her boyfriend, and so she decided to exit the classroom. Dong-tae decided to pretend to bump into her, when suddenly their gazes met, making the young man very nervous. He nervously tried to lie, claiming that he accidentally bumped into her and that it wasn't intentional. Unju looked at the stuttering, timid young man with a small blush on her face, before putting on a small smile. The girl asked him if he was free, leaving the young man baffled with red cheeks. Meanwhile, on the football field, the ball struck a passing student in the head. This person looked at the ball as it landed on the ground. The shooter politely apologized and asked the student to shoot the ball back to him. The footballer then asked him to kick it with all his might. And so the young man decided to shoot just as the player told him, when suddenly the ball was shot at an incredible speed, cutting a few of the player's hairs. The ball even managed to bend the bar of the goalpost, before exploding upon impact, in front of all the players, to the point where one student was unable to stand after witnessing such an incredible feat. The mysterious student watched the others as they were baffled and amazed, drawing a small, satisfied smile on his face. A boy and a girl were walking in the sunset. Thunju proposed to help with the box that the protagonist was carrying, but he refused. Dong-tae, who was happy despite this not being a date, stated that as a man, he shouldn't let her help. Unju was tasked by the teacher to deliver their late classmates' belongings to their house, and since her boyfriend was too busy, she asked for Dong-tae's help, who immediately accepted. And so they arrived at the deceased dicer's house. With that, they arrived at the 11th floor, as an uncomfortable silence settled between her and the blushing Dong-tae. They were now in front of the door, and so they rang the bell. They rang it multiple times, yet no answer. The protagonist realized that no one was home, when suddenly a door was slightly open, and someone came out curious about who the young ones were. Meanwhile, back at the school, everyone was still baffled by the shot that bent a metal bar. The young satisfied shooter smirked and began to walk away, when suddenly one of the players stopped him and began to complain about the destroyed ball. The others asked him to knock it off, but he kept going. But it seemed like the mysterious person couldn't hear him, when suddenly the miracle shooter turned around and asked the player what he should do about a popped ball, who explained that he should buy a new one for its original owner or at least present an apology. The mysterious person then decided to provoke the young man, asking what would happen if he didn't. This triggered the player, who immediately attacked him, but the miraculous shooter countered with one of his powerful kicks. Meanwhile, at the late student's house, which had become unattended, our hero decided to take a look around from the corner of his eye. Bunchul's mother was happy to see his friends return his personal stuff, as well as the other handsome young man that stopped by earlier. Dong-tae realized that the young man in question was Taebin, while Yoonju, trying to be polite, stated that her son was a brilliant student. The mother still couldn't grasp the fact that her son had died so young, and blamed it all on herself for the way she raised him. But the protagonist interrupted her in a burst, affirming that his friend was not the type of man to take his own life. He claimed that there must have been another reason for this early departure, but he lacked the words to express himself. As he remembered all that happened with his friend, Dong-tae thought of how useless the expression "if only" truly is. That he still thought of what would have happened if he had accepted those weird quests in school. He could have potentially saved his friend from the fatal fall. Our hero didn't even dare to think of the other possible outcome. With that, he was left silent when he suddenly began to tremble out of anger, which didn't escape the mother. Knowing that her son's friend thought so highly of him allowed her to find some peace, and so she asked him to never forget her beloved son, which the protagonist accepted. She proposed that the student dine with her, yet Unju tried to decline, but the woman, who had forgotten her groceries, rushed to get them, asking the young ones to watch the house while she was gone before they could even reply. Our hero was now alone with his crush, asking her if she was okay. The young girl seemed confused. Dante asked why Unju was staring at him, to which she replied by stating that the young man seemed different, so naturally he assumed it was his height or face. The young girl affirmed that even though she noticed those changes, she felt as if something else had changed, yet failed to notice what it was. Dante looked at her as she smiled at him, and overwhelmed by the moment, he began to stutter and use the bathroom as an excuse to get away, leaving her intrigued. As he thought about Yeonju's words, our hero's cheeks turned red. Dante arrived in front of a door, thinking that it was the bathroom, and so he decided to see what was behind it. Meanwhile, at the school where the mysterious person kicked the player, all happened at high speed, which satisfied the mysterious person, yet his kick was stopped. To his surprise, the player managed to stop his devastating foot, and so the miraculous shooter backed down. He was left intrigued as the player stopped his attack without being hurt, and so he realized that the player was also a dicer who had maxed out his endurance. Meanwhile, the door was slowly opened, revealing a room with a screen and a desk with a pen and paper on it. The protagonist realized that this was his late friend's room. With that, he walked in, entering the late dicer's room. Dante noticed that the mother left her son's room as it was. This left the protagonist wondering about the data his friend collected about the dice and what Byung-chul had actually discovered. Dante then approached the notebooks on the desk when he was suddenly startled by Yeonju calling out his name, making the pile of notebooks fall. One of them had the word and the drawing of a die, piquing the young man's curiosity as he noticed the magic word. The curious Dante picked up the notebook. The notebook was filled with data about dice and the dicers, which didn't escape the protagonist's attention, and so he started to turn the pages. The notes told about how their writer failed to know more about X and what's essential for dicers, along with their ranks that can be climbed with new skills. This notion of rank intrigued the young dicer. The late student classified Taeban as an A rank, while the protagonist was a B rank or something inferior. Byung-chul also wondered about the limit of the skills, and so he decided to hack into the server in order to expand his knowledge, leaving the young man shocked. Dante then started to flip through the notebook for answers, but what followed didn't concern this subject. The late dicer wondered what would happen if everyone became like him, stating that it was unlikely. Yet the spread of the dice did indeed happen. Byung-chul seemed to be fascinated by the idea of more dicers. Being a dice user depended on being the biggest part of society or not, and being able to keep the secret. More dicers would surely appear, and so its users would start to fight. The player stated that the mysterious person didn't obtain enough dice, while the other players decided to break their fight, and so one of them claimed that the ball was of no importance anymore. But just then, the foot of the mysterious student broke someone's arm, while the protagonist wondered if the spread of dice would separate the dicers from the others. And so if the number of dice users increased and more dicers were born, the world would be ruled by the dice. And just like the broken arm, such accidents could happen once more. The boy who tried to stop the two dicers from fighting was lying on the ground, agonizing in pain with his shattered arm, leaving the two of them shocked and speechless. And so all the students rushed to him, while the two dicers were surprised by this one intervening. With that, they wondered if they should cease their fight, when suddenly one of their phones began to vibrate. One of them received new quests. The first quest was to keep fighting to the end, while the second was to hurt an innocent student by accident, and lastly, gravely injure another one. The mysterious person was baffled by the outrageous quests that he received. But just then, the player's phone also vibrated. It turned out that both dicers received the same crazy quests. The miraculous shooters were revolted to receive such scandalous demands. But just then, the player started to count the bystanders. This intrigued the mysterious student, so the player revealed that he was wondering if this quest was, in fact, applicable, leaving the other in a state of stress and unease. After that, in the night, Dante and Yeonju decided to go on their way. It was dark, and the streets were illuminated by the lights. Unju thanked the protagonist for his help, but Dante shook it off and stated that the late student's mom seemed exhausted. Suddenly, a truck came by, making the blushing protagonist get close to the girl in order to avoid it, and so the truck passed by. Dante then asked Unju her opinion on a potential world like fiction with superpowers. The girl didn't think that these abilities would be very useful. The protagonist then asked her about a scenario where humans could change their looks, intelligence, and physical abilities to their will, making Unju think for a while. In the end, she revealed how she believed that people should live with what they have, unlike when she was younger, and how she wanted to work hard with her own qualities. Yeonju revealed being curious about this question, so Dante claimed it to be a way to kill time. Yet the girl revealed how wonderful it would be if she could use psychic powers in order to get more time to practice, making the young man ask for permission to watch her competition. But when he proposed to have dinner together after the competition, Yeonju politely declined, stating that she would go out with her boyfriend. And so an awkward silence settled. Yeonju then insisted on walking on her own, yet the protagonist insisted on accompanying her. But the girl revealed that such kindness would give others the wrong idea, leaving him silent. And so they parted ways, with Dante watching her until she disappeared into the horizon. As he walked away, he thought about Yeonju's opinion. That night, the night sky was bright, decorated with stars. With the notebook in hand, our hero admired the view, as this way of life was also challenging for him. Later that same night, Dante texted his crush to make sure she returned safely. The protagonist was unsure of the words to use in his text. After some thinking, our hero found the sentence, and after gathering his courage, sent the text. Dante was happy to see that she quickly responded to his message. Our blushing hero then said that he'd see her the next day at school. Her reply with a good night filled the young man with excitement. Dante couldn't be happier. But just then, he received a text from a different person. Ash was aware that the dicer was disappointed that it was him texting and not the girl. Before teasing our hero about it, making him blush in embarrassment, Dante decided to ask X something, piquing his curiosity. At first, he hesitated, but then the protagonist revealed that he had read his late friend's notebook. He then recalled how X stated that he didn't have a problem with dicers unless they broke the rules, which he confirmed. This is why our hero associated his friend's death with him breaking the rules by hacking the game. X then stated that any troublemaker in his game should be immediately removed. The mystery man was surprised to see the protagonist realize that his friend had managed to hack the system. Dante recalled how Branco claimed that there was more to the dice than he knew and how he found something odd written at the end of his notebook. In the end, there was a mysterious note that left him confused. In order for our hero to finally meet X, he would have to become the top dicer. This made our hero think for a while. He then remembered what Yoonju said about people living with what they have. Yet if he hadn't become a dicer, it would be possible that Yoonju wouldn't have noticed him changing and he wouldn't be able to converse with her. Dante really wanted to know Byung-chul's last message to him. As in the notebook, he mentioned how the dice, once perfected, would allow its user to go beyond human limits. This was his last message. The next day at school, the students began to discuss yesterday's fight. One of the witnesses affirmed that some of the students were hurt and even injured while trying to break up the fight between the two sides. Another student noticed that some of his classmates were missing today, but the witness affirmed seeing something odd, piquing the protagonist's curiosity from afar. He recalled how many students were hurt while trying to stop the fight, when suddenly something shiny appeared. The witness was wondering what this object was and decided to pick it up. This alien object was, in fact, a dice. But when the students asked the witness to show it to them, he claimed to have left it at home. Tabin was also listening from afar, when suddenly, something seemed to have caught his attention. The class door was quickly opened. A student came rushing in, stating that something big was happening. This intrigued the others, and so the student affirmed that some of the girls in the other classroom had become more beautiful. All were intrigued by such news as the student affirmed that everyone was rushing to see them. As they watched, some students speculated that the three girls' transformation was due to plastic surgery, while others didn't, and jokingly speculated that this was due to a prettiness virus. One of the three girls was pleased by this gossip, but as all went to take a look, one of the students asked the protagonist if he was also going. Our hero declined, thinking of how the number of dicers had quickly increased. The school domain slowly became a terrain for quests. While someone was peacefully using the toilet, someone suddenly slapped his posterior, startling the poor student as the slapper was only fulfilling his quest. A girl was busy on her phone, sending a fake message about how she was a runaway in Seoul with no money, asking people to download an app called The Righteous to see her profile, contact, and pictures. But when someone asked her about what she was doing, she refused to reply as she was trying to get 50 followers for a quest. On the other hand, someone locked his friend in the warehouse for dice, while others began to bully someone as everyone was obsessed with completing extra requests. At sunset, a public announcement was made to talk about the penalty game between students, and as it was made, a young boy continued to walk down the hallway with a bag in hand, ready to enter a classroom, when suddenly someone stopped him from entering. The one guarding the door asked what he wanted, making the young boy stutter, as he had heard of a student that was giving out dice. And so the guard grabbed the bag to see what he was willing to offer. With that, precious items along with money fell to the ground. The guard then smacked the young boy on the head as he had shamelessly stolen these objects from his sister. Yet someone from inside decided to grant him access out of kindness. And so the young boy was finally inside the classroom. The mysterious student asked him about his business with him. The boy stated that he was here to become a dicer, as all his classmates already were, yet no one agreed to give him a die. This made the student giggle. The player from before, who accepted to give him dice, welcomed this boy into his family. The word family intrigued the boy, leaving him startled, as all the members of the family were looking at him. Suddenly, his bag was snatched from him for examination. The boy had brought money, a gaming console, along with 2 checks and fake watches. The examiners also found a ring and a silver necklace. When the boss was asked about the items, he requested to put them in a bag. The boy couldn't be more nervous. With that, he asked for his dice, but the family asked him which class he belonged to which he responded, Class 5. The boss asked the boy if all his classmates were really dicers, which he affirmed. When suddenly, the boss stood from his chair, grabbing the young boy by his collar, as he was, in fact, a liar. The family was fully aware that only a minority of Class 5 were dicers, which was why the boy wanted to get the dice early. Yet the boss, who released the boy, decided to give him a die before asking him what he would improve first. The boy wanted to become more handsome since he loathed being mocked for his teeth, and so the boss decided to give him a die, making the boy grateful. And so a red die was given. This detail didn't escape the boy, as he was well aware of it being unusable by others, and so he demanded a blue one. The boss claimed that this was a sign that the boy was now part of the family and that there was a chance of him betraying them once he obtained a blue die, which was why he had to prove himself in front of the family, according to him, which startled the player. As the boy signed the pledge, the boss asked about his little sister, stating that if he knew someone prettier, to bring her to him. The The boy would have to do this or bring something valuable to pass his loyalty trial. With that, he exited the classroom. The dicer Eddie faced before asked about the boss's purpose for all this, to which he claimed that they could be beneficial, stating that he was giving them quests like X since multiple pawns increased his winning odds. The boss also mocked the boy's goal, wondering if he could actually satisfy those who wanted to be dicers. The next day, the sun shone brightly. A phone was held by its frustrated owner, as our hero didn't know how to climb the ranks, speculating that he needed more dice. Dante began to think. The quests became different after fulfilling a certain number of them. They also began to extend as the number of dicers increased. Dante was able to snatch some dice from students with his agility when suddenly a shouting voice was heard. It was the three girls who had suddenly become pretty. Our hero noticed that the quests were being quickly completed when a new one showed up. Dante was certain he would be able to reach the roof before everyone else. Meanwhile, the boy was feeling uneasy as he recalled the past events preventing him from obtaining a die, making him think about when he would really become a dicer. The boy expected to become a dicer early, yet now he had to bring a pretty girl to the family. He then stumbled upon someone carrying a pile of books, and so he apologized for unintentionally knocking over the book carrier. With that, he checked on her. Yeonju affirmed that no harm was done. The boy then discovered that the girl was transporting the books to the chorus classroom before anyone arrived. After hearing this, the boy decided to assist her. Even though she tried to decline, he snatched the pile from her, stating that a man should carry them. And so the boy headed to the chorus classroom with Yeonju, who grew a bit tense. Someone was running, finally reaching the top of the stairs. Dante opened the door, happy to be the first on the roof. Yet he wasn't. Taben had already collected the dice. The protagonist was left disappointed as the boy smirked with pride. The two dicers looked at each other in silence until Taben declared that he had something to say. Meanwhile, Yeonju and the boy arrived at the music room. The girl was really thankful for his help. The boy was uneasy, but just when the girl was about to thank him, something caught her attention. As he locked the door, leaving her intrigued and uneasy, the boy revealed that he found her really beautiful. Yeonju was confused as the boy stuttered. He asked her if she was a dicer. Even if Taben had something to say, the protagonist didn't care and decided to leave as he congratulated him on arriving first. But Taben wasn't done. Dante's curiosity was piqued when the first dicer stated that fights were going to happen between the newly formed groups of dicers and that he needed his help to contain the dice. Taben stated that the protagonist should help him since it was his doing, yet Dante stated that there was no need since the dicers most likely improved their lives. The protagonist then stated that people should be happy now, like Taben, who was transformed by the dice. But just then, the protagonist noticed someone running toward him. With that, he was able to evade Taben's surprise punch. The confused Dante asked about this sudden reaction, annoying Taben, who stated that there was no point in explaining since he couldn't grasp the gravity of the situation as he prepared for a round kick. But just as the protagonist evaded, the first dicer claimed that he couldn't start all over because of him, intriguing the protagonist. Our hero managed to block the next kick and gain some distance. Taben asked his classmate if he was still in love with his girlfriend, to which he didn't respond. This silence was the only confirmation the A-rank dicer needed. He explained that Yeonju was still unaware of dicers. If the community expanded, she would soon find out that Dante was a part of it, and so he asked him if he would mind. Meanwhile, back in the music classroom, Yeonju was intrigued by the word dicer. The boy explained that dicer referred to a person in possession of an abnormal dice that lets him enhance his physique and intellect, but Yeonju affirmed that she didn't know about it. That he didn't believe her, as it was very trendy in school, seeing how everyone began to improve. But just as the girl recalled all the odd events, the boy realized that she wasn't lying, and began to panic once he realized that she didn't have any dice, and suddenly pushed her. With that, Yeonju fell to the ground. Filled with regret, the boy apologized for his sudden burst. Yeonju was now lying on the ground, with the boy looking at her with a blush on his face. Just then, Dante and Taben each received a notification. A new quest was available. Back in the music room, the boy decided to offer the pretty Yeonju to the family in order to obtain a dice. But just as he asked her to stay here, she grabbed the book pile to stop him, throwing on his head, making him release a scream in pain. And so the boy in pain grabbed the poor girl's foot, leaving her terrified. Back to the dicers, a new quest appeared, consisting of saving a girl from a boy in the music classroom. Dante speculated that the girl in question might be his crush, and so he rushed to the class, leaving her boyfriend behind. Our hero ran as fast as possible, before finally arriving at the music classroom and noticing something. Taben was already there, breaking the door. Dante speculated that the A-rank dicer had a special skill to arrive before him, but cut that thought short to focus, as he decided to break down the door, forcing it open with his shoulder. The protagonist was now in front of Yeonju and the boy. The girl noticed the protagonist, but before he could move, his shadow quickly passed him by, startling the boy as he grabbed him by the collar. Taben had the wannabe dicer against the wall. The first dicer was furious at the atrocious sight, yet the boy tried to explain himself. Meanwhile, a hand was given to Yeonju, who confirmed being unharmed as the protagonist checked on her. Dante was happy to see her safe, but as he helped her, Taben was still dealing with the boy, who stated that he only wanted to become a dicer. Yet the A-rank dice user didn't want to hear any of it, but the B-rank, on the other hand, was intrigued by these words. The girl asked her boyfriend to stop as she was unharmed. Dante also pleaded with him to put the boy down as Yeonju was safe, before screaming that the boy might end up dead if Taben kept this up. But just then, our hero was startled by his phone vibrating. Dante couldn't believe it. The quest was complete, and X decided to immediately reward the dicers. The protagonist was startled by this news, and so it began to appear, leaving the girl and the two dicers in complete shock. Just like that, Yeonju was left intrigued as it was her first encounter with the dice. 3 blue dice were now shining in the room. The girl was in shock as she picked up the mysterious objects, realizing that this was the object of pursuit of the boy. The boy getting beaten up confirmed that those were the dice in question. He claimed that just by using them, one could change anything about himself, but Taebin ordered him to keep silent as he slammed him into the wall. The boy started to beg for mercy when a gentle hand came to help. Unju implored her boyfriend to release the boy, before asking about the dice appearing in the music classroom. The boy thought for a moment, before stating that someone in the room was in fact a dicer. Taebin pretended to be clueless, leading to his girlfriend turning her gaze to the protagonist, but Dante also rejected the blame. His heart began to pound as all eyes were on him, but in the end he kept denying his true status. The protagonist grew worried as the uneasy girl dropped the case with her sad smile. After that, at sunset, Dante seemed to have noticed something as he was on his way. Our hero noticed a video game with "Game Over" written across its screen. He wondered if Uju was smiling because she realized that he wasn't telling the truth or if she was just at ease. Dante looked at the sky and remembered. The girl was now familiar with the concept of dice, and so the boy asked her about her intentions with those dice. To his surprise, she wanted to keep them since they apparently didn't belong to anyone. X was thrilled to have a new dicer, but our hero was startled at the idea of Yoonju becoming one. The girl thought for a moment. She then pointed out that the dice were the reason behind the boy's aggression, who deeply apologized, stating that all dicers were selfish, who began to form gangs, only accepting the best and treating all the wannabe dicers as servants. The blue dice were shining in the girl's hand. Yeonju stated that things like these dice should only be fiction, as she decided to take the dice to everyone's surprise and never put them to use to everyone's astonishment, leaving even X baffled. Back to the present, Dante was unsure, but he also thought that the world would be better without those dice. Meanwhile, at school, the boy was now face to face with the boss, who was now aware that Yeonju was in possession of 3 blue dice, refusing to roll them, and that both Dante and Taebin claimed to know nothing about dicers. The boy confirmed, yet the other student didn't believe him, as he was certain that the protagonist was a dice user and almost sure when it came to Taebin. This piqued the boss's interest, while the other student stated that he wanted to take his revenge. The boy was nervous, but then asked for dice as a reward for providing valuable intel. Even though the boss would have rather had Unju brought to him, he decided to grant his new minion his reward. Yet to his surprise, he received 2 red dice. The boss explained his system, stating that the boy went from silver to gold with 3 red dice and that he would receive a blue die once in sapphire and even better rewards once higher. The poor boy had a hard time believing it, but just as he reached his hand toward the boss, a tap was heard as someone hit the boy with a powerful kick in the upper part of the chest. Just like that, the other student laid the poor minion on the ground. The boss congratulated him for now being in control of his own strength, as the boy had a hard time breathing, unable to stand up. The other student then put his foot on his face, stating that he would make him a dicer, after he managed to create a scenario where he and Dante could face each other without being interrupted. The bell rang. As the day was over, someone began to question his next actions. The nervous boy regretted going to the family and offering them his sister's stuff, before remembering how one of them casually kicked him to the ground. The boy began to panic as he was supposed to set up a fight with Dante. If both he and Taebin used dice, it would make it impossible for him to become a dicer. When suddenly, someone approached him. The boy began to blush as this person was wearing a skirt. A mysterious girl appeared, who asked the young man if he was truly talking about dicers, which he confirmed. And with a seductive voice, she asked the boy to share his story with her. Later, our hero passed by some children playing football, when suddenly the ball came bouncing his way. This intrigued the young man as the little children unintentionally sent it his way. But just as the ball was about to cross the road, to the children's horror, Dante's agility kicked in, and so he quickly halted the ball, before it could be run over by a car. Seeing the children running towards him, the protagonist kindly returned the ball, leaving them impressed. The kids began to praise the high schooler, stating that he looked like a superhero. This made Dante happy, making him recall the one and only Spider-Man saving a kid from a truck. The hero that everybody looks up to and has Mary Jane with him. The hero that gets to kiss the girl at the end of the movie. This made our hero wonder if he could obtain superpowers once he became a top dicer, as he watched the 2003 Spider-Man 2. Dante stared blankly at his screen as he began to wonder. He began to imagine how he would tell his crush about his identity as a dice user and how he only used it to help others. Dante began to picture himself fighting bullies and saving an innocent girl, and how Yoonju would admire him for it. Dante was sure that dice weren't evil. X confirmed and recalled how the girl thought of their users as simple-minded people. The mysterious person then proposed stealing the dice that she kept with her since storing them would be a waste, but Dante declined. Our protagonist was ready to tell his crush the whole truth about him being a dicer, and how his late friend's departure caused more of them to appear. X was looking forward to it. The next morning at school, the students began to discuss how many of their classmates were absent, either hurt or trying to obtain dice, and how numerous guilds were being founded. So one of the students stated that he would greatly help whichever guild made him a dicer. Unju was listening to the babble about how a mysterious girl was giving dice for free to students, making her grow worried. Dante began to wonder about his crush's reaction once he revealed that he himself was a dicer. Despite being terrified, our hero was determined to tell her. But just as he started to stand from his desk, a random girl approached Yeonju and asked for some help to solve a problem, which she quickly agreed to. Dante watched from afar as they discussed it. and decided to talk to her another time. Later that day, he approached her but quickly backed down as he was too nervous, deciding to try once again at the break, leaving Eunju confused. Yet at that time, the girl was with some friends, which is why the protagonist decided to talk to her at the end of the day. Later on, the 5th period started, yet the teacher seemed confused, as too many students were absent from class 3 and asked the rest to focus as they were having stats next year, before stating how odd it was that everyone was becoming smarter and prettier. Stating how the students seemed tired from lunch, he decided to tell them a story. But when he proposed Pandora's box, the students refused as they were already familiar with this tale. Yeonju seemed preoccupied, and our hero was feeling down as he had to be careful when unveiling the truth. All who heard the story knew that this box, which was in fact a jar, was entrusted by Zeus, who stored the rest of his inventions in it for Pandora to protect. But the woman's curiosity got the best of her, allowing countless disasters to descend upon this world once she opened the said box. Our hero related this story to the dice and the current events. But just then, Dongtae's phone began to vibrate as the teacher was explaining. The protagonist grew nervous since his phone was louder than usual. But just then, our hero realized something about the sound. To Dongtae's surprise, his phone wasn't the only one vibrating. Many of his classmates also received a notification at the same time. The protagonist was shocked as a quest could be distributed, but never on such a large scale. A new quest was available. Despite being hesitant, our hero decided to accept the new challenge. The new quest had Eunju as its target. The dicers had until Saturday's sunset to rip off the poor girl's clothes, humiliate her, take her dice, and take a revolting picture of her. Dongtae was left in disbelief in front of this crazy new quest. Our hero felt alarmed to see his crush being the target, so he quickly turned his gaze towards the girl who seemed confused. The teacher was annoyed since his course was interrupted by the students' phones, accusing them of doing it on purpose. Yet the students didn't care and began to look at the clueless Yeonju with mischievous eyes, gossiping about her being the target. So the girl with the glasses rushed to shush them, making them realize that she was no dicer. And so the students asked the teacher to continue Pandora's story. Meanwhile, the boss of the family was thrilled by such a quest involving such a gorgeous student, and with that decided to attack as soon as possible. At the same time, his henchman with a bowl cut grew angry as he speculated that Dongtae would also be participating. The 3 girls were also looking forward to this quest as they weren't fond of the chorus girl, and so they decided to eliminate their competition to assert their reign over the school. A little bit further, the mysterious girl also received the Eunju quest, and was also pretty amused by this shameless quest. All the dicers were discussing this quest with excitement, but meanwhile, on the rooftop, Dongtae screamed at X to cancel this quest, yet he coldly refused. The protagonist affirmed that Yeonju, who didn't know about the dice, was innocent and ignorant of their rules. But X affirmed that this quest had the sole purpose of satisfying his amusement regardless of the rules, since he was the one in control, before teasing the protagonist about having a crush on the target. And so Dongtae claimed with a determined scream that he would make sure to protect the chorus girl to the very end. Meanwhile, in the hallway, 2 boys noticed Yeonju and realized that she was clueless about the situation, making them opt to ambush her later on since they had plenty of time. Yeonju heard them as they talked about making a plan the next day since it was Saturday, leaving her uneasy. Dongtae was determined to shield her from harm until the quest was removed once the timer reached 0. But X questioned Dongtae if he truly thought himself capable of stopping all the dicers alone, and so he decided to give him a unique custom quest. And so our hero received the quest of protecting the target until the end. Dongtae was shocked by this quest and even more intrigued by the prize, which was a mysterious die with question marks as faces. At the end of the day, Yeonju expressed how odd she felt today as strangers' eyes followed her everywhere to her boyfriend. Hearing this, Taeban proposed taking her to a faraway amusement park on Saturday, but the girl declined, stating that she had to practice at school tomorrow. With that, the first dicer stated that he would be observing Saturday's practice in that case. Taeban realized that it would be challenging to get his girlfriend out of the danger zone. Someone was flipping through the notebook looking for data about the mystery die. The notebook told about how red dice could be synchronized and how X, who enjoys observing chaos, gives tailor-made quests for all his dicers. Yet nothing was written about such a mysterious die. Not knowing what tomorrow would hold, our hero decided to keep 12 red dice with him to synchronize later. Our hero related this situation to Pandora's box, which was closed too late despite Pandora acting immediately. Dongtae then wondered how Hope was the only one left in the jar and how it was stuck with all the disasters in the first place. The next day, Yeonju affirmed to her friend on the phone that she was on her way to the auditorium, while the girl told her to hurry under the pressure of the 3 dicers. At the same time, the family was also preparing its move. But as the game started, they weren't the only ones in a hurry, as Dongtae rushed to protect his beloved and start his accursed Saturday. With that, our hero made his way to Yeonju. X then decided to give him data about the quest. According to him, the quest started shortly after 5:30 in the morning and ended at 19:48 in the afternoon, making the quest 14 hours and 17 minutes long. The protagonist would have to fend off all dicers who were tasked with assaulting the girl in question. X wondered about the situation's outcome. This entity was excited for the upcoming result. Yeonju opened the door and took one look. The girl seemed shocked. At the same time, our rushing hero stopped mid-run as he stumbled upon a group of beaten-up teenagers lying on the ground. From the looks of it, Dongtae realized that they were also dice users and speculated that the A-rank dicer was the one to put them in such a state. Meanwhile, Yeonju seemed shocked to see her boyfriend waiting for her outside, wanting to go to school with her. But the girl noticed a few bruises on his hand. Yet Taeban reassured her that he just hurt himself while exercising, and so they went on their way as Dongtae arrived at the scene. Our hero watched them as they went away. Taeban, who noticed him, told Dongtae to go away with one look of his eyes, leaving him annoyed. But since the dicers he had just taken out were just beginners, Taebin shouldn't inflate his ego as Yeonju was at risk. Later on at school, Yeonju noticed that everyone who greeted them arrived early. Yet the present students were the only ones attending today, as it was Saturday, and with that, they decided to repeat with what they had. Some of the spectators recognized the protagonist and asked him if he came here to watch the cute girls, which he denied. And since the piano player wasn't available, a female student went to replace him. This girl, whom both Dante and Taebin recognized as a dicer, presented herself as Miju from class 2. And after Miju introduced herself to Yeonju, who she seemed to know only by fame, the students started the rehearsal. With that, the auditorium was filled with the piano tunes. Most of the seats were left empty. Taebin admired his girlfriend on stage, but Dante was enchanted by his beloved's performance. Yeonju then noticed and waved to the shy boy, who immediately waved back with excitement. It was almost 11 a.m., marking the 6th hour of the quest. The call made our hero speculate that he exaggerated the dicer's desperation to get dice. But then Taebin approached our hero and stated that his presence wasn't necessary since he could guarantee the girl's safety by himself, before stating that it seemed like the dice users must not be as interested as they were before. Dante began to take this into consideration, but little did he know that he was being watched from afar. The boss of the family stated that the first 2 dicers were shielding the girl as expected, and with that, he informed his minion to start the plan very soon. Dante felt uneasy as if he could feel eyes on him. But just then, he noticed something wrong with the lights. He was left in awe as the projectors began to move. Dante couldn't believe his eyes, while Yeonju was left clueless about the upcoming disaster. Taebin hurried towards the exit and was unable to open the door. He was left confused as the exit was locked. The protagonist was astonished as the lights began to fall off, making Miju smile in secret. The heavy projectors were about to fall on the chorus girls, and so our hero rushed to the stage while warning the singers. But he was too late, as the projectors had already fallen. The horrified Dante was left in complete shock. Yeonju was completely baffled, as a certain death had missed her by an inch. Dante rushed to check on the girl, who confirmed being unharmed. Miju began to sneak near Yeonju with a smile on her face. Meanwhile, the boss of the family was watching from afar, and so ordered his minions to commence the next phase of the plan as one of them reached the power switch, cutting all electricity, plunging the whole auditorium into complete darkness. Both of the first dicers realized that this was someone's doing. Dante checked on the target once again, who confirmed being alright. But just then, an approaching figure activated its nocturnal sight. With that, Miju was able to see through the darkness, ready to catch the poor chorus girl by surprise. And so Miju grabbed the scared Yeonju from behind. The horrified girl wondered about her attacker, but Miju advised her to keep silent, threatening to disfigure her. With that, the terrified target was dragged away. Dante then began to call Yeonju's name. Our hero jumped on the stage to check on her. Despite his calls, our hero could only hear silence. The protagonist decided to use the light of his phone since he was blinded by the darkness. With that, our hero resumed his search, but his flashlight was too weak, forcing him to use his dice. And so he informed X, who stated that our hero had 12 active red dice. X confirmed that the young man had rolled a total of 12 dice. With that, Dante decided to use 10 of his 44 skill points to acquire the skill Night Vision. And so began the synchronization, improving our hero's eyes. At the end of the process, our hero was left with 34 skill points and improved vision, allowing him to identify his surroundings without any light. But just then, he noticed that his beloved was nowhere to be found. Our hero realized that Miju was the one who kidnapped Yeonju before noticing drag marks on the ground, and so the protagonist rushed to save her. Our hero was finally met by some light as he rushed to Yeonju's rescue. He then began to recall his dead friend's words while running. As he remembered the boy's phenomenal left arm, he recalled how he stated that dicers could acquire unnatural powers unreachable by normal humans. Dante began to wonder if his enhanced skills could already be considered supernatural gifts. He was left confused as to whether he had already surpassed human capabilities or not, but he was at least sure that all dicers were far superior to regular humans. Dante began to wonder what would happen next, but just then, he noticed a figure harming another while dragging it, when suddenly someone waiting for him ambushed him with a kick. But Dante managed to evade the blow. The boy, who barely evaded the damage, was surprised by his attacker, who immediately struck another quick attack, aiming for the hero's legs, who quickly jumped out of the way. As he gained some distance, the protagonist took a good look at the ambusher. Dante was baffled as he seemed to recognize his attacker. Meanwhile, back at the auditorium, the dicers confirmed the success of this phase of the plan, while Taebin realized that his girlfriend was kidnapped and Dante went to pursue the kidnappers. And so he decided to restore the lights in order to go after them. With that, he began to locate the power switch of the auditorium, and as soon as he located it, he rendered the distance perfect. With that, Taebin pressed the button on his phone and activated the power of teleportation that required a certain number of dice. And after entering the coordinates, he began the teleportation. With that, a circle of light appeared right under his feet, when he suddenly disappeared, leaving the members in the family confused. He stated to have witnessed a light, but little did he know the first dicer was now behind him, and so Taebin smacked the dicer's head into the glass, before driving him away, lighting up the room and restoring the lights of the auditorium, making the students wonder who restored the power. The boss of the family was left amazed and became thrilled at the idea of showing Taebin the power of his dice guild. Meanwhile, Yeonju was still being dragged by the female dicer, who opened the door and brutally threw her inside the classroom. But when Yeonju demanded an explanation, the girl stated that this was part of the deal, and even though she wanted to humiliate her herself, they were going to take pictures, leaving the target confused. Miju claimed that the girl wouldn't understand as it was a dice quest, and that she would ask for help later on. before closing the door, leaving Eunju inside alone and terrified. Meanwhile, Dongtae asked his attacker, who would be recognized from their encounter at the funeral, to clear the way. But the dicer stated that this wasn't their first interaction and that they had old matters to settle. Meanwhile, in the dark classroom where Yeonju was locked, the girl began to look at something shiny as she began to think about the situation with the 3 blue dice in her hand. The students were intrigued as a mysterious person restored the lights in the electric room. With that being settled, Taebin went on his way. But just as he went down the stairs, the first dicer heard an odd noise. Taebin was surprised since the auditorium was filled with students, all looking at him and looking for problems. These malevolent intentions coming from them scared the poor chorus girl. The boss of the family greeted the first dicer and stated that this was Taebin's first encounter with him and his guild. But to the boss's surprise, Taebin's face was decorated with a smile. The young man only had 9 skill points left, so he decided to save his dice for later and deal with the problem on his own. But just then, one of the dicers attacked Taebin, trying to take him by surprise. Yet the boy dodged the punch with terrifying ease, before counterattacking with a kick to the face, knocking his opponent to the ground, leaving all the other dicers astonished and petrified. With that, he decided to entertain himself with this dice guild. Meanwhile, Dongtae asked his attacker, who claimed to have met him before the funeral, if he was also here for the chorus girl. But the attacker affirmed that he was only here for him, not her. Dongtae, embarrassed, stated that he wasn't interested in him, making the dicer blush as he affirmed that he had no such romantic intentions. But instead, he was here because of the embarrassment Dongtae inflicted on him, confusing the protagonist, who recognized his attacker as Bunchul's past bully. The dicer was happy that his target finally recognized him. Back then, he took pleasure in assaulting the poor student, before Dongtae entered the scene, ready to defend Bunchul despite being recognized as the one being bullied before. But just then, the protagonist punched him in the face, knocking him off his feet. The confused, beaten-up bully could hear our hero helping his friend. He couldn't be more intrigued since the protagonist was the kid that everyone used to pick on. Just then, he watched Dongtae giving the boy something shiny, like he was too beaten up to recognize it as a dice. Later in class, he could hear the laughs and rumors about some students who were demolished by Dongtae, leaving him annoyed. The bully even recalled the punch, to the point where he began to wake up in a sweat after reliving the embarrassment inflicted by the protagonist in his dream over and over again. But the truth was then quickly unveiled to him, as he saw the dead body of the late dicer. The boy was speechless in front of this sight, as the ground was covered in blood right next to the alien dice. In the end, he decided to pick it up. Back to the present, he asked Dongtae if he knew what he thought after getting familiar with the dice, piquing his curiosity. The dicer was disappointed, stating that if he knew the powers of the dice before, he would have stolen all of them, leaving the protagonist baffled. The bully revealed that he wasn't sure of his actions due to the presence of a corpse, but as he recalled the event, he remembered it as a giant treasure where he only took a small portion. Seeing the bully laugh only made our hero angrier since his friend died that day. With that, the bully quickly charged at the protagonist, who barely evaded a kick to the face. As he dodged, our hero realized how fast his opponent was. But the bully wasn't done yet as he jumped into the air. Fearing the worst, Dongtae quickly flinched and evaded a devastating kick that was strong enough to damage the ground. Dongtae realized that this dicer focused on enhancing the power of his legs. But just then, the bully was about to catch him with a surprise attack, so the protagonist had no choice but to block the kick. That knocked him back a few meters away. The bully then claimed that the exhausted Dongtae didn't focus on his physical abilities, before stating that he overlooked one matter, and that he should have started to ready himself right when the number of dicers began to increase, before stating that he used the power of the dice to greatly enhance his own legs. Dongtae was a little quicker than his opponent, but that advantage was canceled by the bully's kick range, leaving our hero in a challenging situation since time was against him, seeing how Yoonju's safety was at stake. With that, he decided to beat the bully as fast as he could, and so began the fight between the two dicers and their respective stats. But meanwhile, Taebin was still stuck in the auditorium, since the fight was still going on. With the first dicer easily dominating his foes, Taebin was quick, and as soon as he turned, he broke a dicer's arm with a simple kick, defeating him with ease. This made the family members speculate that Taebin was practically invincible. The boss couldn't deny his amazement. He didn't want to resort to the 3 fire foxes, but this was the only way to deal with Taebin, who used 2 of his skill points to renew his strength. With that, he was ready to continue the fight. Meanwhile, in the equipment room, where the screams for help couldn't be heard, the chorus girl was desperate for someone to come and free her, before realizing that it was pointless, when suddenly she was struck by an idea and pulled out the blue dice in her possession. This made her think deeply, as she recalled how the boy from back then stated that these dice could be used to improve one's appearance or abilities by rolling them, and how the one that trapped her claimed that there was no point in explaining since non-dicers wouldn't understand. Hyunju stared at the dice. Her blue eyes were greatly focused on the blue dice in her hand. But just then, the door was opened, startling the poor girl. A mysterious boy had found Yoonju, who was imprisoned in the equipment room. Meanwhile, Dongtae was still fighting, evading the first kick directed at his face, and the second aiming for his feet, before regaining some distance. The bully was annoyed by the protagonist who wouldn't face him directly. With that, our hero wondered if he had no other choice but to use his 34 points left in order to beat the bully. Meanwhile, in the auditorium where Taebin was still facing the family, some of the dicers were hidden, searching for the right opportunity. One of the dicers of the families grew too, hiding outside in the hallway, wondered if the prize was worth the risk, and so another affirmed that it was. He then pulled out his phone and explained that the quests were accomplished for each insult and each picture, before adding that they could turn to harassing her in order to earn a generous amount of dice. One of them asked if they could harm her in an intimate way, so the dicer explained that this privilege belonged to the boss, making the boss look like a lustful man. But just then, A loud slam was heard, making them wonder if they would be engaging soon. Two of the dicers began to discuss their plan with the dice, so one claimed that he would use them for his height while the other wanted to assure his enrollment into college. But just then, the fat boy approached the two students, recognizing them as dice users, and stated that the boss of the family would make him a dicer if the mission was successful, making the two of them look at him with uneasy eyes. Before claiming this to be a lie to the fat boy's surprise, stating that the red dice that the boss gave were just fakes that he bought at the store and that they got their blue dice elsewhere. They then advised him to copy the kid that was behind him and just flee the scene. But just then, the door was opened, and a member of the family ordered the students to engage against just one person, to their surprise. The student then stated that this was their chance to get as much dice as they wanted, motivating the troops to go into battle. And so they came face to face with Tabin, who was exhausted from the countless dicers he had single-handedly beaten up. To his surprise, more foes had appeared. The boss encouraged the members of Group 2, stating that Tabin was already tired and they only needed one good blow, before stating that he would also join the assault and that whoever vanquished him first would have the honor of doing the first quest with him, along with receiving lots of dice. And so the first one charged at the first dicer. But as soon as he attacked, Tabin was quick to react, and with just one hit, defeated the enemy dicer. Meanwhile, Dongti decided to use his skill points again. X then asked about the skill he desired to enhance. The protagonist decided to use 10 skill points on his agility. This made the bully laugh, since he assumed that Dongti planned to beat him using only his speed. After the synchronization was completed, X informed the dicer that he had reached the peak of his body's agility and was now at risk of injury, but our hero didn't care. The bully wanted Dongti to face him head-on, and so Dongti charged right at him, shocking the bully when our hero suddenly jumped. The protagonist was now on the window, to the dicer's surprise. The bully then decided to attack, only to miss and only hit the window, shattering it to pieces. This temporarily blinded him as he tried to regain sight of the hero, but little did he know Dongti was right behind him, ready to kick him in the head. Meanwhile, in the auditorium with all the beaten-up dicers, Tabin approached the fat boy, who was the only one not to attack him, just to notice a cutting knife in his hand. The first dicer was shocked to know that someone here aimed to stab him, so the terrified fat boy immediately dropped the weapon and denied his intent, begging Tabin to spare him as he was just a regular non-dicer. With that, the first dicer turned to the boss, who began to panic, seeing how he didn't expect Tabin to be so powerful. So he turned to his last minion, reminding him that he was here to become a dicer, and affirmed that if he didn't stand his ground right here and right now, he would never obtain such an honor. The fat boy reached for the weapon, stating that he wanted dice, and charged at the first dicer from behind, with his cutting knife in hand. Just like that, Tabin had been stabbed in the back. The baffled boy couldn't process it, as all he could see was the blood on the floor. Back to Dongti, the protagonist managed to kick the bully in the back of his head, and before he could even react, the dicer was knocked down. Dongti took a moment to catch his breath and check that the bully was truly beaten. And with 6 hours and 15 minutes left until the end of the quest, our hero rushed to rescue his beloved, who had been startled by the door suddenly being opened by a shady figure, which left the girl speechless. His face couldn't be seen, leaving Eunju curious about this person's identity. Meanwhile, Dongti kept searching for her while calling out her name. He waited for a response, yet only silence answered. The bully was left confused since the chorus girl was rumored to be in possession of dice that she refused to roll. This made him think of Eunju as a prideful person who already pictured herself as perfect, while all the others struggled to become dicers, before pointing out that even Dongti used the power of the dice. With that, the angry bully asked the protagonist why he was so determined to protect such a person, leaving him speechless. But since there was no time to waste, our hero quickly resumed his search while screaming for the girl. Dongti first met his crush in middle school and first thought of her as an odd girl, but in reality, she was an honest person with a noble heart. A girl that was nice to everyone and liked by all. Hanju was the crush of every boy, including the one she just greeted. She was thrilled to know that a familiar face like Dongti would be with her in a music class full of strangers. As she left with her friends judging her for talking to someone like him, our hero was surprised to see her being nice to the likes of him. With that, he began to recall the question asked by the bully as he went on his way lost in his thoughts. In the equipment room, the poor girl begged the stranger to stay away. The mysterious person was none other than the boy from the music class incident. Eunju threatened to scream if the boy came any closer, but to her horror, he claimed that no one would come even if she screamed her lungs out. The boy stated that he was now a dicer and that he came here with a different purpose. He then began to pull something out of his pocket. Eunju began to fear the worst. The boy showed her his phone, and on it was a message from X, destined for Eunju. Eunju couldn't believe her eyes and was intrigued by the mysterious application. The cheerful entity presented itself as X and claimed to want to converse with the girl. Meanwhile, in the auditorium where the shocked Tabin was stabbed by the fat kid, the first dicer punched his attacker away. As the knife fell to the ground, he stood there in silence and touched his wound, only to find blood on his hand. The stabber began to cry in horror. The boss of the family was thrilled, thinking that Tabin had lost the fight since he was stabbed, and suggested that he surrender now. But the dicer just stood there, trying to catch his own breath. The overweight boy deeply apologized, claiming it to be an accident, but the boss affirmed that it was intentional as he praised his minion. Tabin began to stare coldly at the stabber, who stated that he only wanted to become a dicer, with tears filling his eyes. At that moment, the A-rank dicer saw his past self in the scared boy, which put him in a tough spot. Back in the equipment room, where X presented itself to the girl, the entity stated that it was the game master that had set his player after her. Eunju realized that X was the one offering dice to the students and asked him to reveal himself. But X ignored her, stating that he had a question, as he was curious about Eunju, who refused to use his dice. Since she had enough time to think about the privileges of dicers, X assumed that she just thought herself better than the rest, or like him, just enjoyed the chaos. He then pointed out that everyone was suffering because of their situation before asking Eunju if she didn't want to perfect herself. Back at the auditorium, the sight of a stabbed Taebin restored the morale and courage of the family members, who were confident they could win without the fox's intervention. As for Dante, he kept running around the school searching for her. The protagonist wasn't sure why he wanted to protect Taebin's girlfriend, who would probably be disappointed to learn that he was a dicer, and might even loathe him, and yet, his feelings for her were enough of a reason for the protagonist's will to protect Eunju. And so he screamed her name again. The girl was shocked by the sound of the distant screams. As she recognized the approaching voice, Dante was now near the equipment room. To everyone's surprise, but Yeonju was suddenly silenced as she tried to signal her position. The boy paused for a second as he was sure he had heard a voice, and with that resumed his search. Now the equipment room was rendered noiseless. The poor girl tried her best to scream, but the horrified Eunju was rendered powerless as the boy restrained her body and mouth. With that, Dante kept going further away. The startled girl noticed that X wanted to continue their conversation in peace, and so he asked her again about her being against the use of dice, but she couldn't express herself with the boy holding her mouth. After regaining the freedom of speech, the chorus girl affirmed that she was far from being superior to others. X began to mock her as he realized the girl was trying to live with what she had. This made Eunju think in silence, before asking X if his dice would also allow one to change the entourage of the dicer just like it changes him. This question shocked both the game master and the player. The nervous X played off as a joke, stating that he never gave it a thought. Eunju stared at the screen with cold eyes as X grew curious about the person the girl was trying to reshape. Despite her insisting, the game master refused, wanting to hear the girl's motive first. Eunju realized that it was impossible to change others since X didn't confirm it, but he then pointed out that he didn't affirm the opposite either. He then proposed that Yeonju use the dice in order to find out for herself. The confused girl thought for a moment before finally asking the game master about the purpose of all his quests, to which he responded that he was only doing it for the thrill of the game, an answer that horrified the poor girl. X enjoyed watching everyone play in the palm of his hand in exchange for the dice that desperately helped them perfect themselves, before asking Eunju to join the game. The crazy game master desperately wanted her in his game, but Eunju declined, stating that she would never become a dicer. This left X disappointed, seeing the girl's interesting potential as a dicer. Before waving goodbye to Eunju, who then witnessed a light, an intense purple light emitted from the boy's screen, startling both, announcing a slight change in the quest, making her fear the worst, as their coordinates had been leaked to all. The dicers were shocked by the quest update that added a GPS. All dicers and Eunju were on their guard, as X added the target's real-time location along with increasing the mission's rewards. And with the time limit remaining the same, X encouraged all the players to charge right at the girl. Eunju saw that she truly was the target of a quest. The boy then asked X if he truly was free to use Eunju as he pleased, which he confirmed. And so he grabbed the poor girl and pinned her against the wall. But just then, they heard a voice ordering the boy to stop. Dante entered the scene by breaking the door. The boy then remembered that all dicers were aware of Eunju's location. But just then, the protagonist kicked him in the head, knocking him unconscious, which amused the game master, staving Eunju from traumatizing harm. Dante then tried to catch his breath, before asking and impressed Eunju if she was injured, and was then relieved to know that she was unharmed. But before she could ask him how he found her so quickly, our hero grabbed her hand, stating that he would explain later as they headed towards the door. But just as they exited the room, approaching footsteps could be heard. Dante noticed it and immediately changed their direction. Eunju was left impressed by her savior, but just then, he stumbled upon a bunch of dicers on the stairs who were all desperate to get their hands on the target, which thrilled X, who compared the situation to a good zombie movie. Seeing how the target was no longer locked in one spot, the dicers stated that the family boss's plan was now rendered useless. With that, they all went to pursue Eunju, leaving Taebin alone with the boss. Dante only had to guarantee the girl's safety for less than 2 hours and a half, but all the dicers were after them, so an amused X advised them to accelerate in order to survive. Yet the game master was intrigued as the young man was headed to the roof when an immense crowd was after him. And after arriving, our hero quickly blocked the door, which surprised X. It was almost sunset. Dante assumed that they still had time before the dicers arrived and asked Eunju to help him block the door. But just then, something caught our hero's attention. The girl had something to say, and after gathering her courage, she asked the protagonist if he was, in fact, a dice user. But just then, the countless dicers realized that the target was hiding on the roof, while Dante was left shocked by this sudden question. Eunju wanted to know if her friend was, in fact, a dicer. But just as she was about to insist, the dicers suddenly arrived and ordered them to open the door. Both of them felt alarmed, especially the protagonist, since there was a long time left before the end of the quest. And so he promised the chorus girl that he would tell her everything later, since it was urgent for them to immediately run away. But to his surprise, the girl grabbed him by the sleeve. The crying Eunju began to beg him. She stated that she was now aware of why everyone was coming after her, and that doubt had entered her heart, fearing that her protector might betray her. But the dicers were getting close to entering, putting our hero in a tough spot. Eunju promised that she wouldn't be surprised by his words, as she begged him to tell the truth, leaving him in a difficult situation, not knowing how to explain. He had no idea how to begin his explanation as he recalled all the crazy past events. And so Dante finally told Eunju that he was a dicer. Meanwhile, The dicer was unable to force the door open since he had focused his skill points on his appearance rather than his strength before asking the other one about his use of the points. They then asked the strength-focused dicers to raise their hands as they were desperate. But in order to break down the door, a fight broke out since this would allow the agility-based dicers to obtain the high ground. Yet just as they argued, a voice ordered them to halt their idiocy. Miju and her friends had now arrived at the scene. One of the dicers stated that they were arrogant to arrive like that and order them around, earning himself a cold stare from the girl on the left. The one with long hair explained that the sun would set in 1 hour, which is why they should focus on the quest to obtain dice. At the same time, on the now silenced rooftop, telling the truth to Yeonju made the atmosphere awkward between them. Yeonju then asked him if he was also trying to humiliate her, but Dante denied it, almost confessing his feelings by mistake. The girl wanted to know if the protagonist was tangled in the mission, but just as he was about to deny it, he remembered the special quest given to him by X, making him stand there in silence, when suddenly the door was broken and fell down. Things were getting worse for Dante and Yeonju. Meanwhile, in the auditorium, the boss of the family was wondering where the error in his strategy was, as it had miserably failed. Taebin stated that the boss was betrayed by his manpower and asked if there were any more foes for him to fight, before turning to the terrified fat boy, who should be his last opponent. And so the first dicer went on his way, ignoring the scared boy and the family boss, who ordered him to stay still. The boss of the Dice family was offended by Taebin ignoring him, but the young man continued on his way regardless. This annoyed the boss, who charged at Taebin, but the first dicer quickly grabbed the arm of his attacker, refusing to free him. Taebin then managed to punch the beginner dicer with monstrous strength, sending him flying across the room. The boss was impressed by such power. It claimed that since he had focused his skill points on endurance, such attacks were pointless against him. And so Taebin clenched his fist and gave his opponent a dark death glare. This terrified the boss of the family, who immediately pretended to faint on the spot. And so the stabbed Taebin went on his way. He was slowly walking towards his destination as blood dripped. Seeing how Taebin was making great effort, X asked him if he wanted to protect Yeonju or if he had another reason. The boy claimed that the number of rankers would rise if he didn't intervene, repeating the same scenario for him. The game master wondered if he could truly stop this outcome. X then told Taebin to stop hiding and go play with the older dicers without worrying, allowing anger to rise in his heart. Meanwhile, on the roof, our heroes had been found, and so the dicers charged all at once at the target. Dante and Yeonju tried to flee, but there was nowhere to run, as they were now cornered by all the hostile dicers who were desperate to achieve this lucrative quest. With that, the situation of our hero was rendered hopeless. Taebin did his best to reach the rooftop despite the pain, leaving a trail of blood behind him. X teased him about it and proposed using his 2 remaining skill points to heal his wound, but Taebin affirmed that he could manage. As less than half an hour remained until sunset, the quest was close to ending, but the target was now cornered by her hunters. Dante was well aware that they just needed to hold their ground until the end. But this task proved to be quite challenging, and so he tried to think of a solution. He wondered if he should use all of his 24 skill points to enhance his physical ability and jump with Yeonju, but quickly scrapped the idea, as a lack of points would only result in hurting the girl. And even down there, dicers were also waiting for them. But just as he was thinking about the course of action, one of the students charged at them with a pair of scissors in his hand. The protagonist managed to evade the stab and was left baffled, along with Yeonju, upon noticing the weapon in his hand, before defeating him with one punch, making him drop the pair of scissors at the feet of another dicer. But just as he was about to pick it up, Dante implored him not to. The protagonist stated that he would beat up anyone who approached them, making the dicers freeze in place before pushing one of their own to the front. The students then stated that since Dante was a dicer like them, he must help them achieve the quest instead of shielding her. The protagonist stated that it was wrong of them to entangle regular people like her in their affairs as dicers. But the dicers didn't care about his sense of righteousness and speculated that Yeonju had promised him something in exchange for protection. Dante then reassured the target that they only had to hold on until sunset marked the end of the quest, leaving the girl speechless. Not sure what to do, the students pulled out their phones in order to take humiliating pictures as requested by X. And so both of them were bombarded by the photo flashes, making our hero grow worried. The amused game master then informed them that these pictures weren't humiliating enough. This made the dicers discuss their next action among themselves. And so one of the 3 girls claimed that they had to hurt Yeonju and strip her down as she and her friends stepped forward. She then picked up the scissors, stating that she was aware that Dante's threat only aimed to buy time. With that, she challenged the protagonist to hold out as long as he could against them. While Miju increased her vision, the girl holding the pair of scissors specialized in agility, while the third one focused on her strength. Yet Dante was determined to stand his ground in front of the 3 dicers, and so the girl charged at him, but the protagonist was ready for it. The girl was fast, but just as she was about to stab the young man, a voice begged them to stop, making him turn around. Yeonju threatened to jump from the roof if they didn't halt their fighting. All those present at the scene were shocked by her actions, as she stated that once she jumped, the quest would be impossible to fulfill. Even X was surprised, but when Dante tried to reason with her, he began to speculate that this was a way to buy some time. But when he tried to get her down, Yeonju ordered him not to approach her. The girl even threatened to jump if her protector came closer. Her attackers tried to reason with her, stating that they only wanted dice. Yeonju pointed out that all of them had begun to act strangely and related their actions to their desire for dice. Yeonju recognized some acquaintances in the crowd despite how some of their faces were modified, before asking them if the ability to transform themselves was really worth the peaceful friendship they had. But the Dicers affirmed that since Eunju was blessed with beauty at birth, she couldn't comprehend their desire for dice. She then tried to guilt them by asking if it was acceptable to assault someone in order to obtain dice. Just then, Taben arrived at the roof. Seeing how the other Dicers were reasoning with her logic, the speed-specialized female Dicer grew extremely frustrated, and so she charged at the target, armed with her scissors, not wanting to hear another word from her. Seeing this, Dante resorted to his super speed while Taben used teleportation, yet it was too late. Despite their best efforts, the pair of scissors had reached the poor chorus girl, making her trip from the rooftop. Eunju was left in complete shock with her ripped clothes, as she felt what seemed a certain death to everyone's horror. Even though Dante and Taben managed to prevent a severe injury, the damage was already done. As Eunju began to fall, our hero quickly noticed the desperate girl, and immediately rushed to her using his super speed, and with that grabbed her by the hand, saving his beloved from a certain fall. Dante was using all his strength to prevent her from slipping. Taben watched as the protagonist lifted his girlfriend up. The girl was left confused since the first Dicer appeared out of nowhere. The young man used his last 2 skill points to teleport himself a distance of 20 meters, and after some effort, the chorus girl was rendered out of danger. But just then, something shocking caught the protagonist's attention. As Yunju's back was already injured, Dante decided to check, seeing the cut on her body while wondering about the quest's outcome, making the female Dicer giggle. She finally burst out laughing and asked X to send her the dices since she managed to injure the target, which he denied. After some analysis, the game master realized that only the clothes were damaged, but their wearer was left unharmed, confusing the girl who clearly saw the injury. X then revealed that the cut was already on her back, which confused all the students, until they realized that this injury was in fact a scar, leaving the embarrassed Eunju lost for words. And so Dante immediately took off his jacket and put it around the chorus girl, leaving her baffled by such a chivalrous display. The shy boy then began to scold her with a blush on his face, stating that what she did was reckless, and that they only needed to last a bit longer as he and Taben shielded her. With that, he turned to the boy in question, and stated that he was also trying to protect Eunju, seeing how he wasn't trying to harm her, which he indirectly confirmed. And while the target was wondering when her boyfriend appeared, Dante considered it settled. With that, he proposed to make a truce with Taben until the end of this quest. Sunset was now close. With a little less than 8 minutes until the end of the mission, the female Dicer ordered them to attack together. And so the Dicers charged at them all at once. Dante opened the festivities with a kick, knocking the scissors out of the Dicer's hand. Taben easily dodged an incoming punch before counterattacking. It was now the strength-specialized female Dicer's turn to attack. The protagonist barely dodged her punch that ended up breaking the ground. He then did his best to block an incoming kick, and with 5 minutes left, the Dicers began to rush toward Eunju. They all urged to complete this mission, including the boss of the family, who was determined to complete it no matter what. But while all the Dicers were charging at the target, the mysterious girl just stood there in silence and watched, as Dante and Taben held their ground. But just when the boss of the family was about to reach the roof, she suddenly kicked him in the guts, knocking him back, making him and many other students fall on the stairs. The Dicers didn't have time to see their attacker's face, who just stood there in silence. Dante struggled to repel all the Dicers as only a minute was left, but just then he noticed. The sun was almost out of sight, and with it completely disappearing, the timer reached 0, marking the end of this quest and failure. X then notified all the attackers that they were unable to succeed, before cheering him up by stating that many more quests were on their way. The Dicers were disgusted by their failure, unable to accept their defeat. Dante was glad that Eunju was safe until the end, while Taben tried to catch his breath. Eunju was relieved when suddenly, to her surprise, the phones began to vibrate. She then turned to the protagonist, asking him why his screen said that the quest was successful. Our hero couldn't believe his eyes, as he managed to complete his special quest, earning himself the mystery dice. Suddenly, a beam of golden light appeared next to the protagonist, right in front of everyone. Dante couldn't believe his eyes, as he was holding his prize in his hand, the dice with question mark faces. This dice was special and still alien to our hero. If the blue dice allowed one to enhance his abilities, the next level should logically grant the user power beyond human limits. This seems silly to the protagonist, who just read it in Byung-chul's notebook, but now it was in his hand. Dante was baffled by this new golden dice, making all the Dicers jealous as he was the only one to get a dice, and a special one at that. They were furious upon seeing Dante getting a dice despite the quest being a failure. The Dicers began to speculate that Dante was, in fact, on a quest of his own, making the mysterious girl wonder about it. In the end, they all saw him as an immoral Dicer like them instead of a shining savior. Our hero was left speechless in front of these accusations. But when Eunju demanded an explanation, Dante demanded everything, but lacked the words to explain himself. As the malice of the Dicers began to rise, it caught Taben's attention. At that moment, the protagonist wanted to affirm that he only wanted her safety, yet he couldn't utter a single word. Just then, Taben fell to his knees. Eunju went to check on him, only to find her boyfriend bleeding. The girl began to panic as she wondered what she should do to help him. Just then, the two Dicers made eye contact. Taben tried to warn the protagonist about using the golden dice, yet he couldn't hear a word he said. Eunju was then startled by Dante, who approached them. The poor girl tried to explain herself to the shocked protagonist, but he already understood it all, when a shadow quickly approached him from behind. Suddenly, Dante found himself getting smacked in the back of his head with a chair. The enemy Dicers charged at the poor boy as he fell to the ground. The thrilled boss of the family began to laugh as they finally had an opportunity to take down the protagonist. With that, he looked at Tabin, who could barely stand on his feet, ready to finish what was started in the auditorium. At first, the protagonist speculated that the dice would bring people happiness, since everyone wanted to be better in every way, but now he began to regret his choices. The dicers then charged at the poor girl, ready to strip her of her dice despite it already being sunset. All charged at the chorus girl as they were desperate for the self-changing dice. The weakened Tabin could no longer fight, to Yoonju's horror, but the dicers stated that she should worry about herself as they affirmed that they were going to take her dice in any way, with or without her cooperation. Yeonju then ran to the edge, making them think that she was about to jump, and so they went after her as she was trying to escape. Eunju was now once again cornered by the thirsty dicers, who quickly grabbed her. At that moment, Dante grew angry as he witnessed his beloved being pulled against her will while being terrified. Seeing this, the hero punched his way out and dashed forward. As anger filled his eyes, he went to save Eunju. But in his rush, he accidentally dropped the golden dice. Just like that, the mysterious dice hit the ground before beginning to spin. As it turned red, odd symbols replaced the question marks on its 6 faces, and so the dice was activated, allowing our hero to level up and enlarge his skill tree as the synchronization was rendered complete. The special dice landed on a hourglass symbol. Dante rushed to rescue Eunju. In this moment of panic where our hero and his 24 remaining skill points obtained a new skill, the protagonist rushed to save her as the purple light appeared right behind him. X then asked him if he wanted to use his 24 skill points to enhance his new skill, and so the protagonist desperately screamed for them to stop. Just then, the power of the dice filled the area. Eunju's tears were frozen in the air as all the students were rendered motionless. To Dante's surprise, the young man was left baffled, as he had a hard time believing his own 2 eyes. Dante was left confused as he couldn't comprehend the situation. His jacket, along with the plane, was frozen in place, but just then, our hero noticed something odd on his phone. Despite also being frozen in time, a weird symbol appeared on his screen. The same hourglass symbol that was on the dice was now on his phone screen. With that, 6 new mysterious skills entered the play. All were frozen. The girl and her attackers, along with Tabin and the head of the family. Dante began to look around, still baffled by what had just happened, as he was the only one granted mobility while everything else was frozen. And so he approached his phone, only to pick it up and find an hourglass icon on it. When suddenly, the phone began to vibrate in the boy's hand as it showed a countdown. X confirmed to the young man that he really was the one to stop time, and that he obtained this ability by using the gold dice. This skill is called Time Pause, allowing its user to stop the flow of time for 10 seconds for each skill point used and granting motion to anything he touches. As the game master confirmed that everything would remain motionless if Dante didn't touch it, it made him realize that he had obtained an inhuman power. X then proceeded to congratulate the young man on becoming a ranker. The term ranker intrigued the young man. Dante then speculated that each one obtained a different ability based on his dice roll, like Tabin, but the game master advised him to focus on the little time his skill had left. Our hero was left with 3 minutes of time freeze. He wanted to take Eunju and run away with her, but the time he had left wasn't nearly enough. And even if they managed to escape, Eunju would still be the dicer's prey with the blue dices in her possession. It would also be impossible for the girl to leave the stabbed Tabin behind. Dante found the situation to be challenging, but he then looked at the head of the family and suddenly got an idea. With the time freeze still being active and Yoonju's clothes being ripped off, our shy hero did his best to cover her with his jacket without looking. And when his hand came in contact with her, a confused Yoonju was startled as she was rendered free from the time freeze. The panicked girl then turned to Dante. Our hero reassured her that it was okay now, and then asked the confused girl to follow his plan. Dante was determined to end this quest once and for all. Just then, the skill effect had reached its end and the flow of time resumed its course. And so the dicers who tried to grab Eunju fell down. All were confused as the girls suddenly disappeared. Then someone came to them and stated that they had failed the quest. Dante affirmed that they could never find Eunju no matter how hard they tried. But the dicers didn't believe him and ordered him to hand over his gold dice, so the young man claimed to submit to their demand if they could beat him in a fight. One of the dicers felt offended by Dante, who wanted to fight them all at once. But just as he was about to punch, the protagonist suddenly vanished, only to reappear behind them, which shocked the dicers who were left confused, and so they decided to charge at him from the sides and corner him. So the protagonist, who reappeared behind them once again, stated that they just couldn't, making them realize that he had obtained a superpower. X was amused as the new ranker was using his few remaining skill points on time freeze, which seemed like instant movement to the naked eye of those trapped in time. Tabin recognized the skill and began to think of how lucky Dante was to obtain such a skill, while the hidden Eunju watched in silence. She recalled how he told her to hide behind the door of the rooftop and was left intrigued about how he would finish it all. But just then, the boss of the family grabbed the protagonist from behind. He then ordered his men to attack Dante while he restrained him, yet our hero wasn't impressed. And just as the first minion was about to land his punch, he was frozen in time once again. The boss of the family, who happened to be touching our hero, was left baffled and confused. He began to panic as all motion was suddenly stopped, realizing that this was the ranker's doing. But just then, the dicer slipped and was grabbed by the shirt right before falling. Just like that, Dongtan held him by the neck, as he was completely rendered at his mercy. The boss of the family screamed at the protagonist to unhand him, but Dante then pointed out his poor choice of words, so the dicer began to beg him not to let him fall over the rooftop. This made the ranker smile as the time freeze reached its end, allowing the goons to find their boss in such a position. Dante then claimed to have an announcement to make regarding the spread of the dices, asking them how they became familiar with the game master, making the rest of the dicers discuss it among themselves. The protagonist stated that the dice began to spread a month ago, and that the first dicer should be aware of his insinuation, as he began to recall a particular event that happened at school. Just then, all the dicers realized something important, and while Tabin began to fear the worst, Yeonju was left confused. It all started with the death of Byungchul, whom Dante had personally made a dicer, which meant that all of them had him to thank for the dice, leaving the masses in shock. Eunju couldn't believe it, but the protagonist seemed to have more to say, and so he announced that he would be making his own dice guild, different from the family and the likes of it. The girl couldn't believe it, as all that happened was Dante's fault. This left her at a loss for words, while Tabin and the others were by his group's idea. So Dante reaffirmed that he was going to create a group of dicers, and since this looked like a game, he opted to call it a guild, stating that it was open to all, before adding that he would do his best to provide them with data along with helping them with quests in order to help them rise to the title of ranker. To his amusement and everyone's shock, the protagonist then stated that they were all free to accept or decline the invitation, before affirming that he would be showing no mercy to his future enemies. The boss of the family used the opportunity to invite the dicers to join his guild instead. Hearing this, Dante tightened his grip, making his hostage fear the worst, but the protagonist threw him out of danger. The boss was glad to regain footing on the ground. With that, he made his escape, promising to come back with his family. Hearing this, the three female dicers left the scene, as they were uninterested in such a proposal. As Dante watched them leave, the dicers were curious if Dante would really help with the quests without demanding bribes, and if he would really give dice to the regular students that demanded them. Dante affirmed that he would be true to his word, but had two main conditions to impose, piquing the curiosity of the crowd. The first being that it would be forbidden to entangle normal humans in their affairs. Tabin was shocked as the protagonist stated that each dicer was responsible for his own actions while doing quests as the second condition. Tabin realized what the new ranker had in mind since he couldn't control people's actions on his own. He would try to ensure Yoonju's safety by forming a guild to make it possible. The protagonist affirmed that he would assist them in becoming rankers. With that, the chorus girl should be safe. As he turned to her and saw her terrified, he thought of how she wouldn't want to get near him anymore. With that, he walked towards her, thinking of how he wanted to show Yeonju that he didn't encourage the use of dice, as the mysterious girl watched from afar. The protagonist thought of how the numerous awaiting days would help him prove himself. It was now nighttime and our hero returned home, marking the end of the long day. The exhausted protagonist realized that his mother was still outside. But just as he was about to take off his shoes, the hero collapsed right there on the ground, as this long day felt like months for him. But just when he began to consider sleeping on the spot, Dante lost himself in his thoughts. Earlier that night, Yeonju thanked him and Tabin from the bottom of her heart before stating that she would continue her way home alone from here on. But she then looked at Dante with sad eyes, as he was the one to make their late classmate a dicer. Our hero stayed silent as the girl blamed him for the changes at school. She then asked if her boyfriend was also a dicer, fearing the worst. Dante then remembered that the girl didn't witness him using his abilities. So the protagonist lied, stating that Tabin never used a dice, but just then, she asked about the place he found his first dice. Dante claimed to have found it on his own, as it mysteriously fell from the heavens, leaving X disappointed as silence settled between Yeonju and him. With that, Yeonju went on her way, and as they watched her walk away, Tabin asked Dante if it wasn't pointless to hide the truth since it would be unveiled sooner or later. This left our protagonist silent. Tabin then decided to abort the crucial matter and asked the hero if he truly meant to form such a guild, which he confirmed, making Tabin reveal that they shared the same point of view, confusing the protagonist. But when Dante demanded an explanation, the A-rank dicer looked troubled, and as he walked away, Tabin asked the boy how he truly became a dicer before revealing that the dice never appeared out of thin air. In the end, Tabin revealed that he wasn't the first one to wield the dice, leaving Dante speechless and shocked. Back to the present, our hero was still lost in his thoughts, thinking about the one he stole the dice from, and what problems and issues he had to face until now. After this adventure, a new week had started, as all were glad to see Dante. Our hero was quickly surrounded by students and admirers that wanted to join his guild. The young man, embarrassed by the attention, asked them to calm down. But our hero was more concerned about Yeonju, who didn't even grace him with a look. But just then, more people began to gather around him, asking all sorts of questions, trying to get his attention, as well as asking him for dices. One of the students even suggested the idea of a uniform for all the guild members and suggested taking the fish imprinted on it as their logo, which didn't convince the protagonist. They then began to ask him about the first physical ability they should focus on and how he chose to boost his agility. Everyone was trying to get his attention using every way possible, so the embarrassed protagonist had no choice but to accept all of their demands. Suddenly, a girl stated that this meant Dante agreed to spend the weekend with her. The young man raised his head, confused to look at this person. A beautiful girl stood in front of him, claiming to have his word. As she gave him an innocent smile with a small blush on her face, the protagonist didn't know what to say, before finally asking the girl about her identity, who just said that she would send him a text later on. But just when he realized that the girl already had his number, she began to run away, preventing the protagonist from uttering a single word. One of the students was intrigued about this mysterious girl, so another one revealed that he was surprised to learn that this was their classmate, Mio. As Dante tried to recall her name, the two boys discussed how she was unrecognizable due to the fact that she was also a dicer. When the dice first began to spread, she was one of the many students who didn't attend school for a short time. The class was shocked to learn that this was Mio, yet the students still had trouble remembering her. The girl was first known as An Yu Dui. This made the student remember her as the fat girl with pimples and glasses who spent all her days studying, rendering him shocked seeing how much she had changed, as she became totally unrecognizable. Dante recalled stumbling upon her once, as his classmates began to laugh when one of them revealed that he used to call her a pig. Mayo's classmates began to talk about how it was rather disappointing to know that the fat girl only became pretty by the power of the dice, as they compared her to an unused lottery ticket. But just then, one of them pointed out how celebrities resort to plastic surgery, and that they should salute her efforts, stating that it must have been challenging for her to change like that. They then began to discuss how she must have achieved lots of quests, and one of them revealed that he rarely received quests, pointing out how odd it was. The student, who was aware that multiple dicers could take on the same quest, turned to our hero and asked him if each dicer received quests unique to them, but the protagonist wasn't sure. This shocked him, as even the leader of the guild was unaware before asking him to lend him a dice if he ever got too many. After that, the day went on normally. Dante decided to ignore Mayo's text when it arrived in order to focus on his dice group. The bell finally rang. Our hero seemed startled as he stumbled upon Yeonju. Dante decided to greet her despite fearing the moment would be embarrassing. But to his surprise, the girl completely ignored him as she passed right by him. The shocked boy speculated that she didn't see him when he was spotted by two freshmen. The girl wanted to know if Dante received her letter, so he nervously tried to explain himself. Meanwhile, Yeonju was preoccupied, having a lot on her mind, as she recalled how some of the girls she tried to greet were talking behind her back, and the other day when her classmate asked her for help solving a different kind of problem. The girl with glasses asked Eunju for her dices, which shocked her, and how she found her music book disfigured when she opened her locker. On the torn-out cover, some girls wrote how she was an egotistical prick who saw herself as perfection and wouldn't let any girl reach her level. But Yeonju decided to take a deep breath and drive away all the negativity. Once in front of the chorus room, the girl opened the door, immediately apologizing for being late. But to her surprise, the room was empty, making her feel uneasy. Just then, a couple of female dicers were passing by when something caught their attention. The three girls recognized Yeonju as the target of last week's quest, stating how unfortunate she must be. They then began to talk about how prideful she must be since, according to rumors, she saw herself as too perfect to use her dices. Seeing this, the girls discussed if they should scare Eunju in order to get her dice despite the rules of Dante's guild, but one of them claimed to not care about his conditions. Worried, Yeonju hopped on her phone and began to text Tabin about the music room being empty, to which he suggested that it must not be training day, but the girl doubted it since the competition was up ahead. Eunju, who decided to wait for the rest, then asked her boyfriend where he was. When suddenly the door opened, making the happy girl speculate that the rest had finally arrived, it wasn't the case. Eunju was left confused as three total strangers walked into the chorus room. The female dicers presented themselves as freshmen who had a question to ask, making Eunju grow worried. But one in the front accused the once popular girl of drooling on her reflection, while the other two tried to hold their laughter. Eunju began to fear the worst as the female dicer cracked a smile full of malice and pulled out a razor blade, leaving her terrified. Just then, someone walked by the classroom and heard Eunju screaming in distress. Having recognized the voice, the girl rushed inside. Mio quickly opened the door and was left shocked by what she was seeing, having noticed the razor blade. Mayo walked in on the bullies trying to restrain Eunju's arms and legs in order to harass her. The chorus girl turned her gaze to find her classmate stepping through the door. Seeing this, one of the dicers warned Mio that she had a razor blade. Eunju watched in silence as the bully grew scared of Mayo's gaze. Just then, to everyone's surprise, the girl began to walk out of the classroom. As she walked away, Mayo could hear the bullies laugh, having speculated that Mayo was unwilling to help Yeonju. And so, Mayo stopped. The annoyed girl felt obligated to do what was right. With that, she returned to the chorus room, ordering the bullies to stop, and when the armed one tried to cut her, Mayo struck her with a powerful kick to the wrist, making the razor blade fall from the girl's hand as she agonized in pain. She then asked them if they really wanted to keep fighting, and so the scared bullies decided to run away, leaving Mayo alone with Eunju to thank her. But just then, the dicer burst out in anger and began to scream at the chorus girl for being such an easy prey to the numerous dicers with her unused dice. As Eunju apologized, Mio turned her gaze to the razor blade, and when asked if she was harmed, the chorus girl affirmed that she hadn't been injured. Mio then stated that this made them even, which confused Eunju. The dicer revealed herself as Mio to her classmate, who was glad to see her. Eunju revealed that she grew worried since Mio had been absent for a while before pointing out how she became a dice user. But the female dicer found it ironic how she didn't mention how much she had changed, unlike the other students who began to gossip about her. Yet when Eunju pointed out that she liked the old Mio, the dicer didn't want to hear any of it. The dicer then stated that the shocked girl was still the same as ever. And with that, Mio went on her way. As she walked away, she advised Eunju to learn how to shield herself from hostile dicers, since she would not be aiding her in the future, which Eunju agreed with. But before leaving, Mio decided to ask Eunju about something. The female dicer wanted to know the chorus girl's opinion about Dante. Just then, the ball entered the basket, marking the success of the quest and the appearance of more dice. Hugh Hyunki and Yang Portang earned 1 blue dice each. Dante began to wonder how long he would be able to hold the guild together as the number of quests increased. Just as a student was showing off the numerous quests he had accomplished, his jealous friend revealed that he didn't receive any. Seeing how each dicer had his own quests, they began to think that X picked favorites, as they also began wishing for a big event where they can earn a generous amount of dice. Back in the music classroom, Yeonju began to think of what the protagonist was to her, before finally revealing that she only saw him as a friend. But Mayo wanted to know if she saw him as something else. Yeonju revealed that she considered Dante a dear friend of hers until the chaos that happened last week. Mayo deduced that this was due to him saving her, but Yeonju was unsure if he just protected her in order to complete his quest. This made the female dicer burst out in anger since the chorus girl related the protagonist's selflessness to a simple quest. Anju was then shocked upon learning that the guild was formed in order to protect her, leaving her to reflect in silence. But in the end, Mayo was relieved that she only saw Dante as a friend. Mio then revealed that she didn't think that being a dicer was a sin, which is why she couldn't comprehend why Yeonju rejected dices. Since all the girls couldn't be as happy and beautiful as her, all of them tried their best in the best way they could. As she walked away, Mayo stated that Yeonju was graced with everything this life had to offer. The chorus girl watched the female dicer walking away, unable to utter a single word, as frustration began to build up inside her heart. Yeonju revealed that life didn't gift her everything. Dark clouds began to appear in the sky, making the students realize that the rain was near. But Dante just stared at the dark clouds with something in the back of his mind. Meanwhile, in the library where Taben was doing his research, the game master stated that the young man was pushing himself too hard since he already had 5 available quests that could make him a ranker, before pointing out that Taben was doomed to start over since he couldn't go back in time as he invited him to a more enjoyable game. The dicer didn't deny it, yet was sure that he could change the course of events. With that, the amused game master stated that he would be foreseeing Taben's heroic attempts to rewrite the past. Just then, the boy noticed the rain and began to look at it with a sad nostalgia in his eyes. He began to recall that night when that person suggested that Taben offer his life to him since he didn't want it. The mysterious person then saved the young man from a certain fall, stating that today he met his fall, and that today he shall also rise. Taben then began to recall another memory, where he met his mysterious savior once again with unconscious young men at his feet, as he asked him not to fear him. The mysterious person asked Taben to come forth instead since he had offered him his life. He then slapped his hands on the table, snapping out the painful past. The bell rang as the rain continued to fall. Our hero forgot to bring an umbrella and began to wonder about his next course of action. But just as he was lost in his thoughts, the protagonist was snapped back to reality by Mio, who proposed to share her umbrella with him. The rain kept falling. The snails enjoyed such weather while people went on normally about their day. Mio decided to break the silence, asking the protagonist, who had been standing in the rain, if he didn't like sharing an umbrella, which he nervously denied, so Mio asked him to get closer. With that, the two dicers were now shoulder to shoulder, and since this was his first time under an umbrella with a girl, Dante began to blush. The protagonist decided to break some ice, and so he pointed out how Mio must have gathered a large number of dices and asked her when she became a dicer, making her expression change. She revealed that she started the day Byung-chul fell to his death, making it even more awkward for our hero. Dante let out a nervous laugh and changed the subject, asking her opinion about the guild she had just joined. But to his surprise, she wasn't a part of the guild. This made Dante compare his failed conversations to a baseball match. But just when he was about to give it his last shot, Mayo interrupted him, wanting to ask him a question. Dante was left shocked when the girl asked him if he was in love with Yeonju. With a red face, the shaking hero began to make excuses, stating that the girl was already seeing Taben, so he wouldn't set his sights on her, making Mayo think that he didn't like Yeonju. The nervous young man tried to claim that he only saw her as a friend and that all the boys liked her. This made Mio giggle, stating that the protagonist didn't know how to hide his feelings. Dante stated that his feelings were now history as his eyes saddened. Mio wanted to know why he was attracted to her, and so he began to think. The protagonist revealed that he fell in love with Yeonju because she stayed the same while conversing with everyone. To him, she was someone like no other. Mio understood this well, as she recalled the time the chorus girls showed her kindness and helped her. But just as she was lost in her thoughts, she was snapped back to reality by Dante screaming at some children. After he made her hold the umbrella, he rushed to help a kid that was being bullied by the others. Dante then checked on the little boy and asked him to stop crying while the bullies claimed that he would never be allowed to play with them. Such heroism drew a small smile on the girl's face as she held the umbrella above Dante and the boy's head. After that, the protagonist explained that he saw the dice as a chance to become a hero who would help those in need, earning himself Anju's attention and admiration. But when he tried to brush it off as a stupid idea, the blushing Mayo revealed that she admired him. This flattery left them both with a blush on their faces. The surprised Dante then thanked her. The rain was almost over. The protagonist thanked Mayo for the umbrella and stated that this was where they would part ways. Mio then shyly proposed to walk him home. Dante began to panic and with a face as red as a tomato, claimed that he would be home alone and that he lived in a bad neighborhood, so it might not be safe, making Mio misunderstand. The protagonist quickly tried to apologize. Mio then shyly proposed to walk him home and even suggested making dinner since she enjoyed cooking and knew that he was home alone and with a blushing face. Just as he was about to accept her offer, the rain suddenly stopped. Our hero was surprised by the last droplet hitting his cheek. The rain had stopped and a cloudy blue sky roamed above their heads. Dante then noticed that the rain was gone, before bursting out in laughter. along with Mio, and so the girl closed her umbrella, stating that it was now useless and that she enjoyed spending time with Dante. To his surprise, this was also Mio's first time using an umbrella with a boy. This left our hero speechless. With that, he wished her to return home safely as she reminded him that he promised to hang out with her on the weekend, but just then, Mio remembered that Dante had asked her opinion about the guild, and after a short silence, she revealed that she couldn't comprehend the idea of referring to it as a type of utopia. This intrigued the young man, who watched her walk away, making him reflect on what she meant by utopia. Later that same day, Dante began to recall his adventures as a dicer and how Mio admired him for who he was. He thought that the Paskin wouldn't believe what kind of person he would become, and that he wouldn't have become it if it wasn't for Yeonju, who thought that he only aided her for his own sake. But just then, he tried to recall what the female dicer had said. Just then, he received a notification, which left him shocked, as it was a special quest to earn a gold dice from the game master. Meanwhile, Yeonju looked at Dante's jacket with wondering eyes. At the same time, the boy was searching the web for the term utopia. Our hero finally found the definition. The term utopia meant an ideal place, but as Dante focused on the second definition, which made it refer to a place of solitude, our hero finally understood what the girl meant back then. The next day at school, a student came to Dante asking if he recognized him, yet the protagonist didn't. To his surprise, the student was happy with his reaction. It was then revealed that he was his classmate who sat right in front of him, Sungchul, who used the power of many dice to alter his appearance, implying that he had completed many quests. At the same time, a female dicer was telling her two friends how they should improve each trait of their faces separately. Meanwhile, an arm wrestling match quickly ended with a crushing defeat that shattered the desk. As the loser asked his opponent how many skill points he used on strength, someone warned them not to damage the desks, while another student informed his friend that he was going to use his blue dice in order to pass today's pop quiz, and that he improved his luck to obtain better rolls. Most of those who attended this school used the power of the dice, which became the very foundation of their society. Yet Yeonju still refused to become a dicer, but the shy hero decided to settle this matter another time. After that, the students played a football match. Just then, one of them showed the tired Dante something on his phone. Sungchul began to ask about the gold dice and if it granted special abilities similar to Dante's power. The protagonist was shocked to see that there was a quest to earn the question mark dice. This made a crowd of dicers gather around the lucky boy in order to see it for themselves, yet Dante was more interested in the quest itself. Yet Sungchul became nervous and hesitated to unveil the requirements to the protagonist. This piqued the ranker's curiosity, but just then, a girl approached him. Dante was left shocked to find Yeonju behind him, demanding some of his time. The boy began to blush as he agreed. Mio bought 2 cans of soda, but while on her way, she noticed something that left her shocked. She immediately hid as she saw Dante and Yeonju alone, and began to peek. When Dante asked what she wanted, Yeonju stayed silent for a while, before handing him a bag which left him confused. Dunju, who seemed to have something to say, gave him back his hoodie. Dante was then shocked when the chorus girl apologized for ignoring him recently before thanking him for protecting her last week. The girl then pointed out how he formed his guild to prevent such events from recurring, making him apologize, stating that he couldn't think clearly, so she affirmed that there was no need. Our blushing hero thanked the chorus girl for understanding. When Yeonju asked if he was harmed, the boy tried to flex his strength, making her state that he was still the same. The boy then pointed out that he had more dices than anyone, before sharing a laugh with Yeonju as Mio listened to them in silence. Dante, who stated that it had been a long time since they conversed like this, asked the girl if she was still getting harassed by dicers. Funju paused for a second as her eyes saddened, as she recalled her massacred chorus book along with the 3 junior girls and how Dante's guild was the only barrier between her and the bullies. Yet she claimed that everything was alright. The confused protagonist then asked about the day of Yeonju's competition, which she stated would occur on Sunday. Mio heard him as he promised to watch the competition. Yet the chorus girl stated that she wouldn't be participating, which surprised the boy, seeing how hard she trained, and so Yeonju revealed that all the others had left the club as she walked away. But when the dicer asked for an explanation, the girl quickly bid him farewell. And when he tried to stop the chorus girl by grabbing her shoulder, he was shocked to see her eyes filled with tears. Dante was baffled. The young man apologized, stating that he only wanted to express his gratitude. Dante then asked what was bothering her. Yeonju revealed that none of the other girls attended training after becoming dicers. She was left lost as even her boyfriend began to change, wondering why it had to end like this. This made Mio reflect on her own thoughts. After that, the bell rang, marking the end of the break. The teacher commented on the strange weather and stated that the class should concentrate since the finals were near before asking them to open their books. Dongta tried to focus in class, when suddenly a phone began to vibrate, which annoyed the teacher. From the multiple phones simultaneously going off, our hero realized that this must be a quest open to all. Mio opened her phone, wondering what the quest was about. The new quest was a race to the school grounds that promised dice to the first 20 students. Mio began to hesitate since this quest was occurring during class time, when suddenly a student stood up, asked for permission to use the restroom, and rushed outside before the teacher could utter a word. The class was then filled with the sound of moving chairs and desks, as the rest of the class rushed outside with all sorts of fake excuses. A teacher was left powerless to stop the dashing students from exiting the classroom. Just like that, the classroom was filled with emptiness. Mio told Dante to come with her, yet the boy seemed in a state of panic. Tabin slowly passed by him without uttering a single word. When Mio stated that they were going to fail the quest, Dante asked her to go by herself, and she insisted on going with him. The girl was left confused as the young man stated that the situation was odd. as he didn't receive the collective race quest. Mio had a hard time believing it as Tabin slowly walked away. Dante's scream was rendered blank. Meanwhile, the students mindlessly raced to the school grounds. The teacher hopelessly ordered them to return to their seats. The instructor then rushed outside, asking the 3 remaining students in her class to wait for her. Demju silently began to shake in frustration. A shocked Mio asked Dante why he didn't receive a new quest, yet even he couldn't comprehend it. The girl then asked X why he was driving Dante crazy, but the game master stated that he wasn't to blame since he had a good reason for his actions. Despite having all authority over quests, the game master revealed that even he had to follow the rules and that Dante was well aware of the reason behind his penalty, which left the young man confused. And so, Mio rushed outside of the class. The girl tried to stop Tabin as she was convinced that he was a dicer who had some intel on the situation. Hearing this, the young man stopped and kept silent, before declaring that he had no obligation to help them even if he knew what was going on. This made Mio realize that Tabin was aware of something, so the boy stated that he was aware that something was wrong. Mio wanted to know why people like her receive more quests than others. She also wanted to know why she obtained the quest for the gold dice earlier than the rest of the dicers. Stating how Mio had a promotion quest to hand was a supplementary reason for Tabin not to answer her question since it would become a nuisance. This triggered the female dicer who grabbed him by the collar, but just then, Dante asked her to stop, stating that his intel wasn't necessary. The protagonist claimed to have come to a theory, and if it was accurate, it meant that the quests received by Tabin were getting fewer, a statement that shocked the young man. Meanwhile, in the school grounds, all the dicers rushed to get one of the first 20 victorious places. The students ran as fast as they could. Hex counted 17 students who had completed the race, when suddenly someone grabbed the girl by the shoulder. It was none other than Sungshul, who threw the girl behind in order to take her place in the race. The boy was happy to have secured himself the 18th place. But just as he was about to claim his reward, someone quickly grabbed the dice. Sungshul asked the boss of the family to give him back his dice, yet the bully quickly claimed the boy's reward for himself, stating that the owner of the dice would be whoever used it first. But just when the boy began to demand his dice back, the boss of the family knocked him out with one punch, filling him with some sort of satisfaction. This marked his 3rd victim, as he was tasked by X to steal blue dice from 5 dicers in order to complete his promotion quest. With that, he began to search for his 4th prey. One of the dicers was disappointed since there wasn't any other quest, so a second one advised him to have a little patience when the 3rd tried to turn their attention to something. Even the boss of the family was intrigued, as to everyone's surprise, someone began to climb up the stairs. Meanwhile, the shocked Mio demanded an explanation as to why both top dicers weren't receiving quests. Dante stated that Tabin didn't receive the Yeonju quest last week, which he unintentionally confirmed with his silence, making him recall something Byungchul had mentioned. The late dicer stated that every dicer received quests proper to him that reflected his true identity. At first, the protagonist compared it to a game where one chooses the race of his character, but he then began to wonder if there were also conditions. Dante speculated that the dice didn't just appear out of thin air, but were instead made using a type of energy source, which intrigued Mio. The young man theorized that the obvious reason behind his immediate transformation and X sending him fewer quests was that he himself wasn't the same as he once was. Meanwhile, the student continued to climb the stairs. One of the dicers recognized him as the student council president. After clearing his throat, the student council president boldly announced the X Sports Festival before ordering the baffled crowd to begin clapping. This triggered the dicers, who demanded that the president get down this instant. But as they rushed to take him down, he claimed that the game master himself had tasked him with this. The student council president then showed his phone as proof that X gave him the quest of announcing a quest. But the dicers, who normally received the quests on their phones, began to complain that the president had to announce this one. And so he resumed his speech, forcing all the irritated students to clap their hands. The game master was using the president of the student council as a middleman in order to announce his newest quest. Everyone was left confused when asked to gaze at the dicer right beside him. The game master declared that person as the dicer's respective opponent, as they were tasked with defeating 3 dicers in order to get 2 dice and beating down a familiar face in order to earn 3. Meanwhile, Meo was left shocked, since Dante began to receive fewer quests because he wasn't the same. But the protagonist explained that it was more complicated. In the past, Dante desired to transform himself, which he did by becoming a dicer. But the more he became his ideal self, the less he had to accomplish, which meant that something was constantly diminishing. At the same time, the dicers were baffled by the game master's fighting quest. Some speculated that it was a joke, but X claimed that his quests were perfectly clear. The game master stated that this was almost the same as a regular race through the ranks. But just as the uneasy dicer stated that the members of the guild were different, a Shabbat charged at him from behind. But he noticed it too late, and just like that, the student was the victim of a surprise attack. Meanwhile, Dante began to wonder what could have changed about him. But just then, the 3 dicers came to the same conclusion. Meanwhile, one of the dicers began to mercilessly beat the other student, making him beg for mercy with a mouth full of blood. But the student recognized his attacker as his classmate and then asked him not to fight him. That he didn't want to hear any of it since X would grant them dice if they fought and won against someone they were familiar with, making the attacked dicer fear the worst. When suddenly, the ambusher himself was surprised by a kick to the face, knocking him off his opponent, who thanked his mysterious savior. Yet this dicer, who tried to catch his breath, had an uneasy look on his face as he asked the one he just saved if he wasn't fully beaten yet. The attacked dicer had a hard time comprehending those words, but was immediately alarmed when his savior began to assault him. At the same time, while Dante was theorizing what must have been constantly decreasing, Tabin's nostalgia resurged, as he also once realized that the energy source must have been desire. The past Tabin tried to get Muyang's attention. This happened 9 months ago. A younger Tabin had to yell the boy's name in order to make him remove his earphones and finally lend him an ear. The young man was angry at Muyang since he was always in solitude with his music, so as a music lover, he didn't see the wrong in living as such. But Tabin stated that he wasn't here to talk about it, but to inform him of the work process of the quest. Muyang's smile quickly faded as he asked the young man what he had discovered. So he began to explain how the quests are fueled by desire and how it controls the type, quantity, and quality of the quest. Tabin came to this conclusion by observing Muyang and the rest of the rankers. The ranker agreed with Tabin and began to praise him for using his skill points in order to enhance his intellect, making him very happy. The beginner dicer then continued, stating that the ranker, who was receiving fewer quests, gifted him a dice in order to have someone that would procure him additional dice. This claim threw the shocked ranker into a judgmental silence, but Tabin reassured him that you would give him all the dice that he needed since he was the one that helped him. Muyang then explained that this wasn't the case since desire always resides in the heart, and since it was dependent on its holder, it would soon start to demand again after being fulfilled. Desire could only be extinguished by something more ideal. Yet Tabin couldn't understand the meaning behind these words and asked the ranker about the reason behind making him a dicer, yet Muyang didn't give a straight answer. The ranker got up and revealed that the game master promised to change the game rules once there were enough rankers, before asking Tabin if he was also curious about X's future plans. This made the beginner dicer reflect in silence. Muyang then excitedly suggested finding all the rankers and teaming up with them at the right moment, before stating that Tabin should sharpen his appearance in order to shock his bullies. With that, he proposed going to meet the others, which an excited Tabin agreed with. But from that day on, Tabin could no longer predict Muyang's plans and thoughts. Yet when he finally understood it all, he was left too shocked to process it. An agonizing scream echoed through the cloudy sky. The poor boy that was being lifted off the ground by the neck began to beg for help, before crumbling right before the shocked Tabin's feet. The young man began to shiver in the presence of Muyang. Another boy ordered the girl behind him to immediately flee once he deployed his powers, and so the ranker activated his special ability, allowing him to tear parts of the ground. Just like that, the young man acquired floating projectiles. The female dicer used this opportunity to flee, jumping to the rooftop of the next building. And so the ranker launched his attack, aiming at Muyang. Despite giving it all his effort, the dicer's target suddenly disappeared, leaving nothing for him to hit other than the ground, leaving him shocked and confused. It looked like his opponent had vanished. But just as he began to search for him, Muyang began to appear behind his target, claiming that he was different from the other rankers who were completely helpless against his time stop. He then grabbed the ranker's neck with extreme strength and broke it, making him fall at Tabin's feet. The ranker tried his best to address Tabin, begging him to run for his life, which horrified Tabin. With that, Muyang began to approach the only dicer left as he asked and not to be feared. After all, he shouldn't run from the one he pledged his soul to. But Tabin was too scared and tried to escape his once savior. Muyang watched him in disappointment as he activated his time stop. The panicked Tabin tried to run as fast as he could when Muyang suddenly appeared right in front of him, to his horror, before grabbing him by the collar. He begged the dicer to free him, yet Muyang, who stated that the boy who came to know the truth about the dice betrayed him, claimed that it was the ranker who betrayed the group that he had formed. Tabin hopelessly tried to punch and kick his way out of Muyang's grip, yet his efforts were pointless. The ranker then looked at the boy, who had tears in his eyes, and stated that the first dice enhanced human abilities while the second one allowed them to transcend human levels. But before he could talk about the third level of dice, the female dicer ambushed Muyang from above, releasing Tabin from his grip. Just like that, the powerful dicer was almost knocked off his feet. The girl then looked at the boy and told him to escape, and so he gritted his teeth and used his special power in order to teleport himself away. The boy then tried to catch his breath, thinking that he was now safe since time stop wouldn't allow its user to travel such a distance. But when he turned his gaze to the result of the fight, Tabin was baffled as he witnessed the female dicer's fall, making him release a scream filled with pain and despair. Muyang claimed that it was now over, with him and Tabin being the last ones standing, stating that the boy could never escape him with just distance. And even if the boy lived undercover and started all over again, the dice would sooner or later reach his hideout, before claiming that he could never escape him where his past. Back to the present, Dante was shocked to see Tabin sweat as nervousness filled his eyes. For the first time, they witnessed how Tabin was thrown into a complete state of panic. The boy began to sweat and shiver in panic. This made Mayo and the protagonist worry, but when Dante tried to check on Tabin, the boy affirmed that he was alright and that he shouldn't concern himself with him. But the protagonist affirmed that Tabin was certainly in a state of panic based on his facial expression, yet the ranker only stated that he just suddenly felt sick. With that, Tabin walked away as he thanked both of them for their concern, stating that this matter didn't concern either of them. But the protagonist, who realized that the matter concerned Tabin's past that he had tried to warn him about, insisted, stating that if it was related to the dice, it concerned all the dicers. Yet the boy affirmed that it didn't concern them and that it would be for the best if it stayed this way. Tabin also revealed that it was crucial for A rankers to never form alliances, which left both Mayo and Dante utterly confused. But just then, our hero remembered to ask the female dicer if she was familiar with the A ranker concept, so she revealed that she only received the promotional quest. Yet when the curious boy asked to take a peek at her quest, the embarrassed Mio utterly refused, but the boy insisted. Mio affirmed that it was inappropriate for Dante to go through a girl's phone as if they were lovers, yet the confused Dante stated that he was simply curious. The blushing girl's reaction was unexpected for the protagonist as she immediately tried to change the subject. Just then, Mio noticed the shouting that came from outside as she remembered that the racing quest was ongoing. And so they entered back into the classroom. But when Dante noticed that Yoonju's seat was empty, Mio, who went to the window, was shocked by what she saw. The girl then asked the dicer to quickly come and see, and to his surprise, an all-out brawl had broken loose among the students. This made the boy wonder what type of quest it might be, to make dicers mercilessly fight each other like this. Meanwhile, the boss of the family was enjoying the chaos as he continued to snatch dice, rendering him one steal away from the gold dice. Yet when the dice's rightful owner tried to claim it back, the dicer responded with a punch to the gut. Meanwhile, the girl that tried to assault Eunju with a razor blade began to pull the hair of another female dicer who was agonizing in pain, severing some of her hair in the process. The bully looked at the crawling girl with cold eyes as she tried to escape while begging for help. In the end, the crying girl gave up on the quest and the dice that came with it, which the bully found pathetic. The assaulted female dicer promised to never fall to such greed ever again as she screamed for help when she noticed Eunju standing in front of her. Dante felt alarmed to see her down there with all the dice users that endangered her, and so the protagonist rushed to Eunju's aid while Mio demanded that he wait for her. Just like that, Maya was left shocked and alone in the classroom. Meanwhile, the girl cried her heart out as she apologized to Eunju and begged her for help, so Eunju reassured her that everything would be alright. The bully recognized her previous victim and began to mock her as she demanded that she surrender her newest one, yet was left irritated when Eunju refused to abandon her friend. Eunju then pulled out a spray as she claimed that the bully was the only one insane here. The dicer realized that she was threatened with pepper spray and began to make excuses, stating that a dicer couldn't be endangered by such a weapon. But Eunju stood her ground as she was certain that even dicers weren't immune to pepper spray. Despite her fear, the chorus girl was determined to shield her friend. Just then, the teacher, who was annoyed by the fighting students that escaped their classroom, ordered them to immediately halt their chaos. Eunju was startled by the man, who was shocked to see the top student be part of such barbarity, and ordered her to regain her seat as he tried to stop the fights, so she asked him to be careful. The bully decided to use this opportunity to charge at the distracted chorus girl. At the same time, our hero rushed down the stairs in order to rescue his beloved, while Maya was left alone with her thoughts. The female dicer thought that Dante was still the same boy that didn't look back at how he mentioned that the desire of every dicer impacted their quests. This made her wonder if the promotional task of hanging out with the protagonist at his house was what she truly desired. Just then, Maya realized how she truly felt about Dante. Meanwhile, in the hallway, Taeban was determined to vanquish Murion once the increase of the rancor numbers marked the debut of the hunt. At the same time, the bully tackled the chorus girl, making her fall to the ground and lose her pepper spray. Yeonju tried to locate her weapon while the angry dicer tried to assault her. The girl began to panic and tried to reach the pepper spray, but immediately felt alarmed as the bully tried to punch her in the face. When suddenly, Dante arrived and used his skill, Time Stop, stopping the flow of time and petrifying Yeonju and the bully, along with the teacher and all of the fighting students. Dante, who was getting used to the skill, decided to use all the stat points that he saved in order to maintain time stop for 40 seconds. And so he decided to rescue Eunju and her friend before putting an end to these fights. But just then, among the petrified students, a shadow began to move. Our surprised hero was certain he had seen a figure moving. This left the protagonist confused since he clearly saw a moving person, and so he began to call it out. But no response, so he screamed once again. But all he could hear was the silence created by time stop. The game master then jokingly implied that the rancor was just fooling around after freezing time. This made our hero speculate that this was all the fruit of his imagination. But just then, he was surprised as his time freeze reached its end, which resumed the flow of time for Yeonju and the bully. But just then, her fist was intercepted. The bully was shocked to see Dante appear out of nowhere to intercept her punch. Eunju was also surprised to see the protagonist. The female dicer began to shiver in fear as Dante, who didn't want to harm girls, ordered her to stay away from Eunju. Just like that, the bully ran away. And so the crying female dicer then rushed to hug the chorus girl and apologized for giving her the cold shoulder in fear of being inferior to the others in case she didn't become a dicer. The girl was really grateful to Eunju, who came to her rescue. But the chorus girl affirmed that Dante was the only one to thank, since she was too powerless to shield the others. Eunju then asked the protagonist if he knew the reason behind the game master's actions, and if he truly enjoyed such mayhem. Dante looked around to see two girls fiercely fighting. At that moment, the teacher rushed to separate two other dicers fighting, while Eunju was curious about the purpose that X was trying to fulfill. But just then, one of the dicers accidentally hit the teacher in the head with his monstrous strength. All felt alarmed as the man crumbled to the floor. Dante, Yeonju, and the student who hit the teacher by accident looked in disbelief. All had a hard time believing that a teacher was harmed. And so his opponent, who began to panic, grabbed him by the collar, yet he affirmed that he didn't harm the man on purpose. When suddenly, Dante screamed for all to stop the chaos. All were surprised as the protagonist ordered them to halt their fights. Yet one of the dicers demanded just a few more seconds in order to choke his opponent, pleading for help to ensure a dice when Eunju pleaded with them to stop. Dante had to remind the dicers of the rules of the guild, the first being to not involve any regular human like the teacher whom Eunju was trying to help. At that moment, Eunju's friend decided to run away, passing by Mio, who watched in silence. Dante affirmed that he wouldn't accept this barbarity and that they should forsake the quest if it brought harm to each other. When suddenly, someone shouted to stop the fights, seeing how the teachers had arrived. But while X was disappointed in the instructors interrupting his fun, some of the students also wanted to stop the quest, while others like Sungshul were annoyed by the ranker who could order them around. The boy was certain he could complete more quests if it weren't for the protagonist. Sungshul speculated that Dante only wanted to become their leader by forming the guild while wishing to have the same rank as him. He then recalled when Dante asked him about his promotional quest, that he couldn't bring himself to answer, since his task was to destroy the protagonist's guild and create discord among its members. Sungshul began to seriously think about it in silence. Dante then stated the second rule, which consisted of every dicer assuming the weight of his actions during quests, before adding how careless it was to purposely harm friends, then asking them who would take the blame. The sun began to set. Inside the principal's office, the principal was furious at the teachers who couldn't discover the reason behind their students' terrible behavior, and so they tried to explain themselves, stating that none of them talked when interrogated as if they were under a sworn silence. The game master, who found the adults boring, affirmed that anyone who ratted him out would be deprived of quests. So the principal recalled how they mentioned that the students had their phones on them while fighting, and they explained how they only found the lock screen when inspecting the devices. This left the room filled with his disappointed silence. And so the teachers and the principal decided to leave this matter unpunished, seeing how it happened shortly after a student's death, marking the end of the field quest. Later that night, the boss of the family let out a hysterical laugh since he managed to steal his 5th dice during Dante's speech. And so he immediately rolled it in order to complete his promotional quest of stealing 5 dice from other dicers. With that, the game master granted the boss of the family a gold dice. The dicer was very excited to finally become a ranker, and so he began to celebrate, seeing how he would now be able to use unnatural powers like Dante and Tabin. Without any wait, the boss of the family immediately rolled the dice, wishing for great power. He was looking forward to receiving his new power, and when he looked at his prize, the excited boy found the suit symbol, leaving him utterly confused. Back then, when time was frozen, before Dante could rescue Unju from the bully, our hero could have sworn he saw a moving figure. But just then, in the frozen chaos, he noticed a shadow standing among the frozen dicers. Our hero was shocked as he was face to face with Muyan. The protagonist then asked the shady man about his immunity against time stop. Dante was still in shock, yet the A ranker didn't bother to give a true answer. Just then, Muyan charged at Dante and jumped into the air, ready to deliver a destructive punch, which resulted in a catastrophic injury. When suddenly, Dante woke up in sweat. It was now morning and he was glad to learn that it was all just a nightmare. Just then, his phone began to ring. As someone texted him, it was none other than Mayo checking if he had a good night of sleep. Our hero just looked at the text before turning to his calendar. This Saturday, the protagonist had to attend Unju's competition, but on the other hand, he also had to spend time with Mayo. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tab's channel.